Nolan Shaw's sweat-slicked hands fumble with the access panel, his heart racing as he realizes what he's uncovered in the Void's restricted files. The space prison's only human inmate stares at the holographic display, comprehending why the Galactic Confederation keeps its alien prisoners strictly segregated. They're all in heat. Every single non-human species incarcerated in this maximum security space station is currently in their mating cycle. The Voxari, those irresistibly beautiful aliens with their intoxicating pheromones, are at the peak of their fertility. Nolan's mind reels as he processes the implications. The prison administration's rigid species separation isn't just about preventing violence. It's about stopping an interspecies breeding frenzy. As if on cue, alarms blare throughout the station. Red lights flash, bathing the maintenance corridor in an eerie glow. Nolan's stomach drops as he hears the telltale hiss of malfunctioning cell doors. The Void's containment systems are failing catastrophically. Chaos erupts in seconds. Alien prisoners of various species flood into common areas, their pheromones mixing in a potent cocktail of desire and aggression. Through a nearby viewport, Nolan watches guards struggling to maintain order, their own bodies betraying them as they succumb to the overpowering sense. Amidst the pandemonium, a flash of iridescent scales catches Nolan's eye. A Voxari female stands in the corridor, her lithe form radiating an otherworldly allure. This must be Vesta, the infamous smuggler he's heard whispers about. As their eyes lock, Nolan feels an immediate pull. Her scent reaches him, clouding his thoughts with primal urges he's never experienced before. Nolan shakes his head, fighting the attraction. His human biology makes him the only one unaffected by the alien pheromones. At least, not to the point of losing control. This realization hits him just as heavy footsteps approach. Krell, the stern Zaxian warden, rounds the corner. His exoskeleton gleams under the emergency lights as he fixes Nolan with all four of his eyes. "Human," he growls, mandibles clicking in agitation. "We need your help." Nolan's mind races. Here he is, a convicted thief turned reluctant hero, thrust into the center of an interstellar crisis. The warden's offer hangs in the air. Assist in restoring order for a reduced sentence. It's a tempting proposition, a chance at freedom he never thought he'd get. But as Nolan glances back at Vesta, he sees another opportunity. In this chaos, escape might be possible. He could flee the void with the captivating Voxari, leaving behind the cold emptiness of space prison. Yet the consequences of such an action weigh heavily on him. Would unleashing a Voxari in heat upon the galaxy upset the delicate balance of interspecies relations? Time seems to slow as Nolan stands at this crossroads. The alarms continue to wail, punctuated by distant shouts and the sound of breaking equipment. Vesta takes a step toward him, her eyes promising adventures beyond his wildest dreams. Krell waits impatiently for his answer, claws twitching near his stun baton. In this moment, the fate of the Void, and perhaps the galaxy itself, rests in the hands of its only human prisoner. Nolan Shaw must decide, will he be the hero the Galactic Confederation needs, or will he seize this chance for freedom, consequences be damned? Nolan's mind raced as he weighed his options. The Zaxian warden's offer and Vesta's alluring presence both promised paths to freedom, but at what cost? In that moment of crisis, a third option crystallized in his mind. "Warden," Nolan said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them, "I have an idea. Let me address the prisoners." Krell's mandibles twitched in surprise. "Address them? Are you mad, human?" "Trust me," Nolan insisted. "I'm the only one here with a clear head. I can buy us time." After a tense moment, Krell nodded and led Nolan to the nearest communication panel. As they moved, Nolan caught Vesta's eye and motioned for her to follow. The Voxari hesitated, then glided after them, her iridescent scales shimmering under the flashing emergency lights. Nolan's fingers flew over the panel, accessing the station-wide communication system. He took a deep breath, then began to speak, his voice echoing through every corridor and cell of the Void. "Attention, all prisoners and staff," he began, his tone calm but authoritative. "This is Nolan Shaw. I know you're all feeling the effects of the mating cycles, but we need to think rationally. Uncontrolled interspecies breeding could have catastrophic consequences for the entire galaxy. We need to work together to maintain order until the situation can be perseverance. As Nolan continued his appeal, he noticed the commotion in the nearby common area beginning to subside. Aliens of various species paused in their frenzy, their attention drawn to his words. "Vesta," Nolan whispered, turning to the Voxari, "can you help keep your people calm?" Vesta nodded, her eyes locked on Nolan's. "I'll do what I can," she murmured, her voice melodious even in a whisper. She moved gracefully towards a group of agitated Voxari, her presence immediately soothing them. For the next hour, Nolan worked tirelessly to maintain the fragile peace he'd brokered. He coordinated with Warden Krell and the guards, organizing emergency containment procedures while simultaneously mediating disputes between different species. All the while, he found himself increasingly drawn to Vesta, who proved to be an invaluable ally in keeping the Voxari under control. During a brief lull, Vesta approached Nolan. "Why are you helping them?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. "You could have escaped in the chaos." Nolan shrugged, trying to ignore the intoxicating scent emanating from her. "It's the right thing to do. Besides, I've got my own reasons for staying on the right side of the law. What about you? Why'd they lock you up?" Vesta's expression darkened. "False accusations of espionage. I've been fighting to prove my innocence, but the Confederation doesn't like to admit when it's wrong." Before Nolan could respond, an explosion rocked the station. Alarms blared anew as Warden Krell rushed towards them, his exoskeleton clattering with each step. "The Drakari!" Krell shouted. "They've taken the armory." Nolan's stomach dropped. The Drakari were a warrior species, known for their aggression and combat prowess. If they were armed, the situation had just become far more dangerous. "We need to act fast," Nolan said, his mind already formulating a plan. "Warden, we need allies. Deputize a select group of prisoners, ones we can trust. It's our only chance against the Drakari." Krell's four eyes blinked rapidly as he processed the suggestion. "Deputize prisoners? That's unprecedented." "So is this entire situation," Nolan countered. "We don't have a choice." As if to emphasize his point, the sound of energy weapons discharging echoed from a nearby corridor. Krell's mandibles clicked in agitation before he finally nodded. "Do it," the warden growled. "But you're responsible for them, human." Within minutes, Nolan had assembled a motley crew of aliens, each chosen for their unique skills or influence within their species. Vesta stood at his side, her presence a constant reminder of the attraction simmering between them. As they armed themselves with the remaining weapons from the guard stations, a gruff voice cut through the tension. "Grok's leading them," a scarred Hrathi rumbled, his fur filled. "I'd recognize that battle cry anywhere." Nolan's improvised security force moved through the station, working to contain the Drakari threat. They faced intense firefights, close calls, and moments of heroism from the most unexpected sources. Through it all, Nolan and Vesta found themselves gravitating towards each other, their trust and attraction growing with each shared danger. The crisis reached a fever pitch as they defended a critical life support hub from Grok's forces. Energy bolts sizzled through the air as Nolan and Vesta took cover behind a console. "On my mark," Nolan whispered, meeting Vesta's gaze. She nodded, her body coiled and ready to spring. "Now!" They burst from cover in perfect synchronization. Nolan laid down suppressing fire while Vesta's agile form weaved through the chaos, flanking the Drakari position. Her quick thinking and Nolan's covering fire saved them from a hidden Drakari lying in ambush, cementing the trust between them. As the battle for the life support hub raged on, Nolan became aware of a new problem. The environmental controls were failing, causing temperature spikes and oxygen level fluctuations throughout the station. "Vesta," he called out over the din of combat, "we need to get to the central control room. If we lose life support, none of this will matter." She nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Together, they fought their way through the station, gathering their allies as they went. The ragtag group battled Drakari forces at every turn, slowly making their way to the heart of the void. As they approached the central control room, Nolan's keen eyes noticed something odd about the pattern of system failures. It was too systematic, too precise to be mere chance. This wasn't an accident, he muttered, pieces falling into place in his mind. Someone wanted this to happen. Before he could share his suspicions with Vesta, a massive explosion rocked the station. Grok's forces had breached the outer defenses of the control room. Nolan and his team rushed inside, sealing the doors behind them. As alarms blared and the station shuddered under the Drakari assault, Nolan found himself cornered in the control room with Vesta and their makeshift team. They were surrounded, low on supplies, and racing against time to prevent a complete systems failure. Nolan's fingers flew over the control panels, trying to stabilize life support while coordinating their defense. Vesta stood beside him, her weapon trained on the sealed door that bulged with each impact from the Drakari battering ram. "Any bright ideas?" Vesta asked, her voice tense but trusting. Nolan looked around at his improbable allies, a Voxari smuggler, a Zaxian warden, and a handful of former inmates from across the galaxy. The fate of everyone aboard the Void now rested in their hands. "Working on it," Nolan replied, his mind racing as he searched for a solution that would save them all buying us enough time to find a way out of this mess. As the words left Nolan's mouth, the station shuddered violently. The lights flickered, and a series of alarms blared to life, their urgent wails echoing through the control room. "Life support's failing," Vesta called out, her eyes wide as she scanned a nearby console. "Oxygen levels are dropping in multiple sectors." Nolan's mind raced. They needed to act fast, or everyone on the station would suffocate. He rushed to the main control panel, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface as he assessed the situation. "I've got an idea," he said, his voice tight with concentration. "We can reroute power from non-essential areas to boost life support and defense systems. It's risky, but it's our best shot." Warden Krell nodded grimly. "Do it, human. We're out of options." Nolan set to work, his hands moving with practiced efficiency as he implemented the necessary changes. Vesta moved to his side, her lithe form graceful even in the tense atmosphere. "What can I do?" she asked, her melodious voice tinged with urgency. Nolan glanced at her, momentarily distracted by her proximity. He could smell her unique scent, a blend of exotic spices and something distinctly alien. Shaking his head to clear it, he pointed to a series of maintenance panels on the far wall. "Those panels control auxiliary power distribution. I need you to manually adjust the flow while I work on the main systems. Your Voxari agility will make it easier to reach the higher ones." Vesta nodded and sprinted to the panels, her iridescent scales shimmering under the emergency lights. As she worked, Nolan couldn't help but admire her grace and efficiency. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Nolan's fingers flew over the controls, redistributing power and rerouting critical systems. Vesta darted from panel to panel, her movements fluid and precise as she made the necessary adjustments. Outside the control room, the sounds of battle intensified. Energy weapons discharged and the dull thud of physical combat reverberated through the station's corridors. Warden Krell coordinated the defense, his deep voice barking orders over the din. As Nolan worked, he became acutely aware of Vesta's presence. Every time she moved past him, he caught a whiff of her intoxicating scent. The stress of the situation seemed to intensify her pheromones, making it increasingly difficult for him to focus. Suddenly, the station lurched violently. Nolan stumbled, nearly losing his balance. He looked up at the main display and saw a cascade of red warning lights. "Gravity generators are failing," he shouted. "Brace yourselves." No sooner had the words left his mouth than the artificial gravity cut out completely. Nolan felt his feet leave the floor as he and everyone else in the control room began to float. For a moment, chaos reigned. Loose objects drifted through the air, and several of the alien prisoners yelped in surprise. Nolan grabbed onto the control panel to steady himself, his mind already racing to adapt to this new challenge. "Vesta," he called out, "we need to get to the secondary control hub. It's our only chance to stabilize the gravity." The Voxari gracefully pushed off from a nearby wall, propelling herself towards Nolan. As she reached him, their bodies collided in the zero-gravity environment. For a brief electric moment, they were pressed together, faces inches apart. Nolan felt his heart race, acutely aware of every point of contact between them. Vesta's eyes locked with his, a mix of commitment and something deeper swirling in their alien depths. "Lead the way," she said softly, her breath warm on his face. Forcing himself to focus, Nolan pushed off from the control panel, guiding them both towards a maintenance shaft. As they entered the narrow passage, they had to maneuver carefully to avoid getting tangled in the exposed wiring and conduits. Working together, they made their way through the station's innards, using the zero gravity to their advantage. They pushed off walls and glided through tight spaces, their bodies often brushing against each other in the confined area. As they emerged into a junction, Nolan's communicator crackled to life. Warden Krell's voice came through, strained and urgent. "Shaw, the Drakari have breached the secondary defense perimeter. We can't hold them off much longer." Nolan's mind raced, searching for a solution. As they floated in the junction, an idea struck him. Unconventional, but potentially effective. "Vesta," he said, turning to his companion, "how do you feel about getting a little dirty?" The Voxari's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Nolan grinned, a spark of mischief in his eyes. "We're going to use the station's waste management systems as a weapon. If we can flood the sections where the Drakari are advancing with organic slurry, it'll slow them down without causing permanent harm." Vesta's eyes widened in understanding, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Brilliant and disgusting. I love it." Together they made their way to the waste management control room, floating through the zero-gravity environment with growing confidence. As they worked to reprogram the systems, Nolan found himself hyper-aware of Vesta's proximity. In the confined space, their bodies often drifted together, sending jolts of electricity through him each time they touched. As they finished the preparations, their eyes met. For a moment, the chaos around them faded away. Nolan saw a reflection of his own growing feelings in Vesta's alien gaze. The attraction between them was palpable, intensified by the danger and adrenaline of their situation. Before either of them could act on the tension, another alarm blared, snapping them back to reality. Nolan activated the waste management override, unleashing a torrent of organic slurry into the corridors where the Drakari were advancing. The effect was immediate. Through the station's security feeds, they watched as Grok's forces were caught off guard by the sudden deluge. The zero-gravity environment only added to the chaos, as globs of waste floated through the air, clinging to the Drakari warriors and their weapons. Nolan and Vesta allowed themselves a moment of victory, their bodies drifting close in the weightless environment. Almost unconsciously, they reached for each other, their hands intertwining as they watched their plan unfold. The moment was shattered by an urgent alert from the long-range sensors. Nolan's eyes widened as he read the display. "A galactic Confederation peacekeeping fleet is approaching," he said, his voice tight. "We've got to restore order before they arrive, or we'll all be in deep trouble." Vesta nodded, her expression determined. "Then let's get to work. We've come too far to fail now." As they pushed off towards the main control room, Nolan couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. The next few hours would determine not just their fate, but the fate of everyone aboard the Void. And through it all, the growing connection between him and Vesta added an extra layer of intensity to every moment. With renewed purpose, they set off to face the challenges ahead, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization through the weightless environment of the embattled space station. As they approached the main control room, the urgent beeping of long-range sensors filled the air. Nolan's eyes widened as he read the display. "A galactic Confederation peacekeeping fleet is approaching," he said, his voice tight. "We've got to restore order before they arrive, or we'll all be in deep trouble." Vesta nodded, her expression determined. "Then let's get to work. We've come too far to fail now." They pushed off towards the main control room, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization through the weightless environment. As they entered, they found Warden Krell and the others struggling to maintain their positions in the zero-gravity conditions. "Status report," Nolan called out as he grabbed onto a console to steady himself. Krell's gruff voice responded, "The Drakari advance has been halted, but we've got new problems. That organic slurry is causing havoc throughout the station. It's clogging systems and making movement nearly impossible in some sections." Nolan's mind raced, assessing their options. "We need to restore gravity, but we can't do it all at once. The strain on the systems would be too much. He floated over to the main control panel, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. I'm implementing a phased gravity restoration plan. We'll bring it back online section by section, starting with the areas most critical for cleanup and containment. As Nolan worked, Vesta moved to his side. What about the inmates? Many of them are still free and panicking in this zero-G environment. Nolan glanced at her, an idea forming. Your pheromones, can you use them to calm the prisoners? If we can get them to return to their cells voluntarily, it'll make our job a lot easier. Vesta's eyes widened, then she nodded. I can try. It's not something I've done on this scale before, but it might work. As Vesta set off to implement their plan, Nolan continued his work on the gravity systems. Slowly, sector by sector, artificial gravity returned to the void. The process was painstaking, each restored section requiring careful monitoring to prevent overload. Meanwhile, Vesta moved through the station, her Voxari pheromones working their magic on the agitated inmates. Her presence brought a sense of calm to the chaos, convincing many to return to their cells without resistance. As she worked, she couldn't help but feel a growing connection to Nolan. His quick thinking and adaptability in this crisis impressed her, and she found herself looking forward to each moment they worked together. Hours passed as they slowly brought the station back under control. The organic waste used against Grok's forces had created slippery, hazardous conditions throughout the void, making cleanup a challenging and unpleasant task. But with gravity restored in key areas, they were making progress. As Nolan monitored the station's systems, a transmission from Warden Krell caught his attention. The warden's voice was strained as he spoke. Shaw, we've got another problem. I've been in contact with the approaching Confederation fleet. Their commander, Admiral Zorn, is demanding a full report and plans to board the void for a personal inspection. Nolan cursed under his breath. How much time do we have? Less than an hour, Krell replied grimly. Just then, an alert flashed across Nolan's screen. His brow furrowed as he investigated, his fingers flying across the interface. What he found sent a chill down his spine. Warden, I've discovered something in the prison's mainframe. There's a hidden subroutine, and it looks like it's the real cause of our initial system failure. This wasn't just a random malfunction or a simple prison break. Someone orchestrated this from outside the void. Before Krell could respond, Vesta returned to the control room. She moved to Nolan's side, her presence immediately calming his frayed nerves. The inmates are secure, she reported. What's our next move? Nolan quickly filled her in on his discovery and the impending arrival of Admiral Zorn. We need to investigate this hidden program, he said. Whatever it was meant to cover up or retrieve might still be here on the station. Vesta nodded, her eyes gleaming with willpower. Let's go. We can use your access to the station's systems and my agility to get past any security measures. With time ticking away, Nolan and Vesta set off towards a restricted section of the prison. As they moved through the corridors, stepping carefully around floating globules of organic waste, Nolan couldn't help but be acutely aware of Vesta's proximity. The stress of the situation seemed to intensify her natural pheromones, making it increasingly difficult for him to focus. They reached a heavily secured door, and Nolan used his newfound access to bypass the lock. Inside, they found a small, unmarked container emitting a faint energy signature. Before they could examine it further, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Nolan and Vesta turned to see a group of elite Confederation soldiers led by a stern-faced officer. The leader stepped forward, his voice cold and authoritative. I am Commander Lex. Hand over the container immediately. Nolan's mind raced, trying to piece together the implications of this new development. As he opened his mouth to respond, the container in his hands began to vibrate ominously, adding a new layer of urgency to their already precarious situation. As the container vibrated more intensely, Nolan's grip tightened. He locked eyes with Vesta, a silent understanding passing between them. In a fluid motion, they spun around and sprinted down the corridor, away from Commander Lex and his team. After them, Lex barked, his boots pounding against the metal floor as he gave chase. Nolan and Vesta weaved through the labyrinthine passageways of the void, their hearts racing. The container continued to pulse in Nolan's hands, its energy signature growing stronger with each passing second. "We need to find a secure location," Nolan panted as they rounded a corner. "Somewhere we can examine this thing without interruption." Vesta nodded, her alien features set in purpose. "The biochemistry lab. It's nearby and has lockdown protocols." They changed course, ducking into a maintenance shaft to throw off their pursuers. As they emerged on the other side, the sound of alarms filled the air. The station's PA system crackled to life. Warden Krell's voice strained as he announced a station-wide lockdown. Nolan and Vesta reached the biochemistry lab, quickly sealing themselves inside. As Nolan activated the security measures, Vesta examined the container. "Nolan," she said, her voice tight with concern, "I recognize this energy signature. It's similar to certain Voxari pheromone compounds, but far more potent." Before Nolan could respond, the container burst open, releasing a cloud of shimmering particles into the air. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. A wave of heat washed over them both, their bodies suddenly hypersensitive to every touch and movement. Nolan's breath caught in his throat as he looked at Vesta. Her alien beauty seemed magnified, every curve and feature impossibly alluring. He could see a similar reaction in her eyes as she gazed back at him. It's some kind of aphrodisiac," Nolan managed to say, his voice husky. "We need to contain it before it spreads through the ventilation system." They scrambled to activate the lab's containment protocols, but it was too late. The compound had already begun to seep into the station's air circulation. Reports started flooding in from all sectors of the void, describing scenes of chaos as inmates and guards alike succumbed to overwhelming desires. Nolan's engineering mind kicked into overdrive, pushing through the fog of arousal. He quickly assessed the lab equipment, his eyes landing on a chemical synthesizer. "We might be able to create an antidote," he said, moving towards the machine, "but we'll need to work fast." Vesta nodded, her movements slightly unsteady as she retrieved compounds from nearby storage units. As they worked, the effects of the aphrodisiac continued to intensify. Nolan found himself hyper-aware of Vesta's presence, her natural pheromones amplified by the artificial compound. Outside the lab, the situation in the void deteriorated rapidly. Admiral Zorn's ship had docked, and he entered the station with a contingent of Confederation troops. The scene that greeted him was beyond anything he had expected. Aliens from various species in states of uncontrolled arousal, with the potential for violence and unwanted breeding growing by the minute. Warden Krell struggled to maintain his composure as he briefed the Admiral, his own biology affected by the airborne compound. "We're doing everything we can to contain the situation, Admiral," he said, his voice strained. "But we need to find the source and neutralize it quickly." Meanwhile, Commander Lex and his team had recovered from their earlier confrontation with Nolan and Vesta. Realizing the sensitive nature of their mission had been compromised, Lex made a critical decision. "Find Shaw and the Voxari," he ordered his soldiers. "Silence them permanently and retrieve that container. We can't let the truth about this experiment get out." Back in the lab, Nolan and Vesta's efforts to create an antidote were hampered by their increasing arousal. The close quarters and intense situation amplified their mutual attraction, making it difficult to focus on the task at hand. Vesta reached for a vial of chemicals, her movements less coordinated than usual. As she turned, she accidentally knocked over a rack of test tubes. The resulting chemical reaction created a small fire, threatening to destroy their work. Nolan reacted quickly, grabbing a nearby fire extinguisher and dousing the flames. As the smoke cleared, they heard the sound of approaching footsteps, guards attracted by the commotion. "We need more time," Nolan said, his mind racing. He turned to Vesta, an idea forming despite his aroused state. "Your pheromones, can you use them to distract the guards? Buy us a few more minutes to finish the antidote?" Vesta hesitated, then nodded. "I'll try. But be quick, Nolan. I don't know how long I can hold them off in this state." As Vesta stepped out to confront the approaching guards, Nolan returned to the synthesizer, forcing himself to focus on the final steps of creating the antidote. The sounds of confusion and arousal from outside the lab told him that Vesta's intensified pheromones were having the desired effect. Just as Nolan completed the synthesis, the lab's secondary door burst open, Commander Lex and his team stormed in, weapons raised. "Hand over the antidote, Shaw," Lex demanded, his eyes darting between Nolan and the vial in his hand. Nolan's mind raced, weighing his options. Before he could respond, another group entered the lab. Admiral Zorn and his own team, with Warden Krell in tow. The Admiral's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. "What in the name of the Galactic Confederation is going on here?" he demanded. Nolan found himself at the center of a tense standoff, the untested antidote in his hand, surrounded by Confederation forces and a compromised prison administration. The effects of the aphrodisiac pulsed through his body, Vesta's allure a constant distraction at the edge of his consciousness. As the various factions in the room eyed each other warily, Nolan realized that his next actions could determine not only his and Vesta's fate, but potentially the future of interspecies relations in the Galactic Confederation. With the lives of everyone on the station hanging in the balance, he took a deep breath, his mind frantically searching for a way out of this increasingly dangerous situation. With a deep breath, Nolan made his decision. "Admiral Zorn," he said, his voice steady, despite the pulsing desire coursing through his body, "I can explain everything." He gestured to Commander Lex and his team. "These men are involved in a conspiracy to weaponize an aphrodisiac compound. What's happening on this station is the result of their experiment gone wrong." Commander Lex's face contorted with rage. "He's lying! Shoot him!" But Nolan was already in motion. In one fluid movement, he grabbed a nearby syringe, filled it with a small dose of the aphrodisiac, and plunged it into his arm. The effect was immediate. His pupils dilated and his muscles tensed visibly as a wave of intense arousal washed over him. "What are you doing?" Vesta cried out, her voice filled with concern. Nolan's hand shook as he reached for the vial of antidote. "Proving my point," he managed to say through gritted teeth. He quickly injected himself with the antidote, his breath coming in short gasps. The room fell silent as everyone watched, transfixed. Slowly, Nolan's breathing steadied. His pupils returned to normal, and the tension visibly left his body. He stood up straight, looking directly at Admiral Zorn. "As you can see, Admiral, the antidote works. We can neutralize this threat." Admiral Zorn's eyes narrowed as he processed the implications of what he'd just witnessed. After a moment of tense silence, he turned to his security team. "Detain Commander Lex and his men. We'll sort this out once the immediate crisis is under control." As Lex and his team were led away protesting loudly, Nolan turned to Vesta. "We need to mass-produce this antidote fast. Can you help me access the medical replicators?" Vesta nodded, her alien features set with commitment. "Follow me." They raced through the corridors, the sounds of chaos still echoing throughout the station. Reaching the medical bay, they found it in disarray, with staff struggling to maintain order among the affected patients. "Clear the replicators," Nolan shouted as they entered. "We have the solution." Working in tandem, Nolan and Vesta input the antidote formula into the replicators. As the machines hummed to life, producing vial after vial of the life-saving liquid, Admiral Zorn's voice came over the station-wide comm system. "Attention all personnel. We are implementing an emergency protocol. Confederation troops will be assisting in the distribution of an antidote. Cooperate fully for your own safety and the safety of others." As the antidote spread throughout the void, the atmosphere began to shift. The frenzied energy of uncontrolled desire gave way to confusion, then relief. In the corridors, longtime rivals from different species found themselves in unexpectedly intimate positions, leading to awkward but surprisingly cordial interactions. Nolan and Vesta moved through the station, overseeing the distribution and monitoring its effects. Their eyes met frequently, an unspoken tension building between them with each glance. Hours later, as the situation stabilized, they found themselves alone in a quiet corner of the medical bay. The air between them crackled with uncommitment tension. "Nolan," Vesta said softly, her alien eyes searching his face, "what you did earlier, it was incredibly brave." He stepped closer, drawn by her presence. "I couldn't have done it without you. We make a good team." The distance between them closed, their bodies responding to a pull stronger than gravity. Their lips met in a kiss that sent shock waves through both of them. The unique combination of human and Voxari biochemistry created sensations neither had experienced before, intensified by the lingering traces of the aphrodisiac in their systems. As they parted breathless, an urgent alert shattered the moment. Nolan rushed to the nearest console, his eyes widening as he read the incoming data. "Vesta, look at this," he said, pointing to the screen. "Long-range sensors are picking up a fleet of unmarked ships. Their signatures match known pirate vessels." Vesta's expression hardened. This wasn't just about the aphrodisiac weapon. Someone's planning to attack the Void while we're vulnerable. Nolan nodded grimly. "We need to tell Admiral Zorn and Warden Krell immediately. Our knowledge of the station's systems and your insights into the various species here could be crucial in mounting a defense." They raced towards the command center, their hands finding each other as they ran. As they burst through the doors, alarms began to blare throughout the station. Admiral Zorn looked up from a holographic display, his face grim. "Shaw, we've got incoming hostiles. What do you know about our defenses?" Nolan stepped forward, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Sir, I've worked extensively on the Void systems. With Vesta's help, I think we can coordinate a defense using the unique abilities of the various species on board." As Nolan began outlining his plan, the command center erupted into a flurry of activity. Screens lit up with tactical displays, and communications channels buzzed with urgent messages. Warden Krell approached Nolan, his expression a mix of concern and admiration. "Shaw, your actions today have been extraordinary. I'll be recommending a significant reduction in your sentence." Admiral Zorn nodded in agreement. "Once this crisis is over, we'll discuss your future. Your skills could be valuable as an advisor on interspecies relations." But there was no time to dwell on future possibilities. The pirate fleet was closing in fast, and the Void's hastily assembled defenses were about to be put to the ultimate test. Nolan turned to Vesta, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared understanding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As they moved to their stations, ready to coordinate the Void's defense, the first shots of the impending battle lit up the darkness of space. Space. The Void shuddered as the first volley of enemy fire struck its hastily reinforced shields. "Incoming!" shouted a technician, his eyes glued to the tactical display. Nolan and Vesta exchanged a determined look before racing to their assigned stations. The command center erupted into a flurry of activity as Admiral Zorn barked orders to his Confederation forces. "Shaw!" Warden Krell called out. "What's the status of our defense systems?" Nolan's fingers flew across the console, bringing up diagnostics and system readouts. His heart sank as he saw the results. "Not good. The earlier system failures have left several key mechanisms offline. We're operating at less than 60% capacity." Vesta leaned in, her alien eyes scanning the data. "I recognize some of these systems. They're similar to Voxari designs. I might be able to help optimize them." Nolan nodded, grateful for her insight. "Let's do it. We need every advantage we can get." As they worked to reactivate and enhance the station's shields and weapons, Admiral Zorn coordinated the deployment of his ships around the Void. Warden Krell's voice came over the comm system, organizing the more combat-capable inmates into makeshift security teams. "Long-range scans are picking up details on the lead ship," a sensor officer reported. "It's the Crimson Talon, flagship of Captain Drazkor." Nolan's head snapped up at the name. "The Torgarian pirate? This is worse than we thought. Their cloaking technology is leagues beyond standard Confederation protocols." He turned to Vesta, an idea forming. "Remember how we used the waste management systems against Grok's forces? What if we modified it to create a debris field around the station? It could interfere with their sensors and maybe even damage their ships." Vesta's eyes widened. "And if we infuse it with a compound that targets Torgarian physiology, we could disorient any boarding parties without causing permanent harm." "Brilliant," Nolan said, already accessing the waste management controls. "Let's make it happen." As they worked feverishly to implement their plan, the first wave of pirate ships decloaked and opened fire. The Void rocked under the assault, its newly restored shields straining to hold. "Multiple breaches detected in the lower levels," a security officer shouted. "Pirates have boarded the station." Warden Krell grabbed a stun baton. I'm heading down there. Keep me updated on the situation up here. Nolan and Vesta's modified waste management system came online just as a group of pirate ships moved into position for another attack run. A massive cloud of debris erupted from the void's external vents, engulfing the approaching vessels. Several pirate ships veered off course, their sensors scrambled by the unexpected obstacle. It's working, Vesta exclaimed, her normally stoic features breaking into a smile. But their celebration was short-lived. The strain of maintaining both shields and the debris field pushed the station's power systems to their limits. Alarms blared as energy readings fluctuated wildly. Nolan's mind raced, analyzing the tactical situation. He spotted a weakness in the pirate formation, a gap that could be exploited. Admiral, he called out, I have an idea, but it's risky. We need to create a momentary gap in our shields to lure them in, then hit them with a concentrated burst of our chemical debris. Admiral Zorn considered the plan for a split second before nodding. Do it, Shaw. Confederation ships, prepare to execute maneuver Zeta 9 on my mark. As Nolan began inputting the commands, movement in his peripheral vision caught his attention. A maintenance hatch in the far corner of the command center burst open, and 3 armed pirates emerged. Vesta reacted instantly, her Voxari reflexes propelling her towards the intruders. She engaged the first pirate in hand-to-hand combat, her movements fluid and precise. Nolan hesitated, torn between executing the defensive maneuver and helping Vesta. With a curse, he activated the final sequence and grabbed a nearby stun baton. He joined Vesta in the fray, their movements instinctively synchronized as they fought back-to-back. In space, Admiral Zorn's ships herded the pirate fleet into position. The void's shields flickered, creating a tantalizing opening. As the pirates took the bait, Nolan triggered the debris burst. A massive cloud of waste and chemicals enveloped the enemy ships, their systems overloaded by the concentrated assault. In the command center, Nolan ducked under a pirate's wild swing and brought his stun baton up in a vicious arc. The attacker went down hard, leaving Nolan face-to-face with Vesta. They stood mere inches apart, chests heaving from exertion, the heat of battle still coursing through their veins. Nice moves, Vesta said, a hint of admiration in her voice. Before Nolan could respond, Admiral Zorn's triumphant shout filled the room. They're retreating! The Crimson Talon has engaged its cloaking device. We've won! As the remaining pirate ships fled, leaving their disabled comrades behind, the command center erupted into cheers. Nolan and Vesta found themselves at the center of attention, their innovative tactics and teamwork lauded by both Confederation officers and station personnel. Warden Krell returned, his uniform torn but a satisfied grin on his face. Well done, you two. I never thought I'd see the day when a human and a Voxari would work together so effectively. Admiral Zorn approached, his expression serious despite the victory. I've just received a priority communication from Galactic Confederation headquarters. They're requesting an immediate debrief on the situation here at the Void, and they specifically asked for both of you to be present. Nolan and Vesta exchanged a look, understanding the implications. Their actions over the past few days, uncovering the aphrodisiac weapon conspiracy, defending the station, and their growing personal connection, would all be under scrutiny. When do we leave? Nolan asked, feeling a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Immediately, Admiral Zorn replied. A transport is being prepared as we speak. As they made their way to the docking bay, Nolan and Vesta walked close together, their hands occasionally brushing. The future was uncertain, filled with potential challenges and consequences. But as they boarded the sleek Confederation transport, one thing was clear. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The ship's engines hummed to life, and the void grew smaller in the viewport. Nolan took a deep breath, his mind already racing with the possibilities and pitfalls that awaited them at Confederation headquarters. He turned to Vesta, finding comfort in her steady gaze. Ready for another adventure? He asked with a wry smile. Vesta's alien features softened into an expression that Nolan was learning to read as affection. With you, always. As the transport entered faster than light speed, leaving the void and its recent upheavals behind, Nolan couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was not nearly finished. The true test of their abilities, their relationship, and the future of interspecies cooperation was just beginning. The true test of their abilities, their relationship, and the future of interspecies cooperation was just beginning. As the transport ship glided away from the void, Nolan couldn't help but notice the increased security measures surrounding the space station. A fleet of Confederation ships maintained a protective perimeter, their sleek hulls gleaming against the backdrop of stars. "Looks like they're not taking any chances after the pirate attack," Nolan observed, gesturing towards the viewport. Vesta nodded, her eyes scanning the tactical formation. "The Confederation's response time is impressive. I wonder if—" She was cut off by the ship's intercom. "This is Captain Zix speaking. We'll be departing for Galactic Confederation headquarters shortly. Our journey will take approximately 72 hours due to necessary security protocols. Please make yourselves comfortable." Nolan raised an eyebrow. 72 hours? That's longer than I expected. "Better safe than sorry," Vesta replied, her tone pragmatic. "Shall we find our quarters?" They made their way through the narrow corridors of the diplomatic shuttle, eventually locating their assigned cabin. As the door slid open, they both paused, taking in the compact space designed for interspecies diplomats. "Cozy," Nolan remarked, trying to keep his tone light despite the sudden awareness of their proximity. The cabin was efficiently arranged, with adaptable sleeping surfaces and environmental controls to accommodate various species' needs. However, the limited space meant that they would be in constant close quarters for the duration of the journey. As they settled in, Nolan found himself hyper-aware of Vesta's movements. The subtle shift of her alien musculature, the faint scent that was uniquely hers, it all served to heighten the attraction he'd been trying to keep in check. Vesta seemed equally affected. Her eyes lingered on Nolan as he stowed their meager belongings, her antennae twitching in a way he was beginning to recognize as a sign of heightened emotion. Their first night aboard the shuttle was a study in undedication tension. They lay in their separate berths, acutely aware of each other's presence. Nolan found himself listening to the rhythm of Vesta's breathing, wondering if she was as restless as he was. The following morning, they attempted to establish a routine, taking turns using the cabin's compact hygiene facilities. As Nolan emerged from the shower unit, he nearly collided with Vesta in the narrow space. Time seemed to slow as they stood there, barely inches apart. Nolan could feel the heat radiating from Vesta's body, see the subtle patterns in her iridescent skin. Her eyes met his, and he felt a jolt of electricity pass between them. The moment was shattered by a cheerful chime from the ship's computer. "Attention passengers, we are now entering a region of increased solar activity. Minor turbulence may occur. Please secure any loose items." Nolan and Vesta sprang apart, the spell broken. They busied themselves with trivial tasks, both acutely aware of the unspoken tension in the air. As the hours passed, they found themselves engaging in long conversations, learning more about each other's cultures and personal histories. Vesta shared stories of her upbringing on the Voxari homeworld, while Nolan recounted his experiences in the Confederation Engineering Corps. Their intellectual connection deepened, adding new layers to their growing bond. They discussed everything from xenobiology to interstellar politics, each finding in the other a keen mind and a fresh perspective. On the second day of their journey, as they were deep in a discussion about comparative propulsion technologies, the ship suddenly lurched. The lights flickered, and a low hum that had been barely noticeable in the background abruptly ceased. "That's not good," Nolan muttered, already moving toward the door. "Come on, we should check with the crew." They made their way to the bridge, finding Captain Zix and his small crew frantically working at various consoles. "What's the situation, Captain?" Nolan asked, his engineer's instincts kicking in. Zix's compound eyes swiveled towards them. "We've experienced a power fluctuation. Engineering is working on it, but—" "Mind if I take a look?" Nolan interrupted. "I have some experience with ship systems." After a moment's hesitation, Zix nodded. "Very well, but be careful. We can't afford any further complications." Nolan and Vesta made their way to the engineering section. As they examined the power core, Nolan's expression grew increasingly grim. "This wasn't an accident," he said quietly, pointing out a series of anomalies in the system. "Someone's tampered with the core. It's subtle, but these connections have been deliberately misaligned. Vesta leaned in, her keen senses picking up details that even Nolan had missed. There, she said, indicating a nearly invisible distortion in one of the power conduits. That material doesn't match the rest of the assembly. Working together, they managed to isolate the sabotage components and implement a series of bypasses. As the power core hummed back to life, Nolan couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. "Someone doesn't want us to reach Confederation headquarters," he murmured to Vesta as they made their way back to the bridge. Captain Zix listened gravely to their report. "This is most concerning," he said, his antennae twitching nervously. "We'll need to alter our course. There's a longer route through the Cerulean Nebula. It's less predictable, which should make it harder for anyone to anticipate our movements." As the shuttle changed course, heading towards the vast, shimmering expanse of the nebula, Nolan and Vesta returned to their cabin. The narrow escape from potential disaster had left them both on edge, acutely aware of the dangers that might still lie ahead. They stood by the viewport, watching as the first tendrils of the Cerulean Nebula enveloped the ship. The ionized gas cast an eerie blue glow over everything, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow. "It's beautiful," Vesta whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Nolan found himself staring not at the nebula, but at Vesta. The play of cerulean light across her features was mesmerizing. Without conscious thought, he reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. Vesta turned to him, her expression a mix of surprise and something deeper, more primal. They moved closer, drawn together by a force that seemed as inevitable as gravity. Just as their lips were about to meet, the ship's computer chimed. "Attention all personnel. We are now entering the densest part of the Cerulean Nebula. Sensors and communication systems may experience interference. Please stand by for further updates." The moment broken, Nolan and Vesta stepped apart, but the tension between them remained, an almost tangible presence in the small cabin. As they navigated deeper into the nebula, neither of them could shake the feeling that this journey was just getting started, and that the true challenges still lay ahead. The true challenges still lay before them, a fact that became startlingly clear as their ship emerged from the swirling azure mists of the Cerulean Nebula. The Galactic Confederation headquarters loomed ahead, a massive structure of gleaming alloys and pulsing energy fields. As they approached, Nolan noticed an unusual amount of activity around the station. Ships darting to and fro, security vessels maintaining a tight perimeter. "Something's not right," Vesta murmured, her antennae twitching with tension. Captain Zix's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're being hailed. Prepare for immediate docking and debriefing." The shuttle glided into a designated bay, the docking clamps engaging with a resounding thud. Nolan and Vesta exchanged a glance, their earlier tension momentarily forgotten in the face of this new uncertainty. As they disembarked, they were met by a contingent of heavily armed security officers. The leader, a stern-faced Thraxian, stepped forward. "Follow me. The council is waiting." They were led through a maze of corridors, each more secure than the last. Nolan's mind raced, trying to piece together the reason for such heightened security. Beside him, Vesta's posture was rigid, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. The debriefing room was a large, circular chamber dominated by a holographic display in its center. High-ranking officials from various species were gathered around, their faces grim. Admiral Zorn, looking haggard, nodded to them as they entered. "Nolan, Vesta, thank you for coming so quickly. We have a situation." Before he could continue, the holographic display flickered to life, revealing a familiar face, the leader of the Crimson Talon pirates they had recently defeated. "Greetings, Confederation fool," the pirate sneered. "You think you've won, but you've only scratched the surface. The Crimson Talon is but a small part of a greater whole. The Crimson Helix. We have operatives in every level of your precious Confederation. Even now, as you scramble to understand the scope of our influence, we are initiating the next phase of our plan." The room erupted into chaos as officials shouted questions and demands. Nolan felt a chill run down his spine as he processed the implications. Beside him, Vesta's eyes narrowed, her mind clearly racing to connect the dots. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station. The holographic display shifted, showing multiple breaches in the headquarters security systems. "It's a trap!" someone shouted. "They're already here!" In the ensuing pandemonium, Nolan felt a strong grip on his arm. He turned to see a security officer pulling him and Vesta towards the exit. "Come with me," the officer said urgently. "We need to get you to a secure location." As they were rushed through the corridors, explosions rocked the station. The lights flickered, plunging them into momentary darkness before emergency systems kicked in. They were led to a small, nondescript room deep within the station's core. As the doors sealed behind them, Nolan and Vesta found themselves alone in a stark, minimalist space. "What's going on?" Nolan demanded, pacing the length of the room. "We should be out there, helping." Vesta placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "We need to think this through. If what that pirate said is true, we can't trust anyone." Hours passed as they waited, the distant sounds of combat occasionally reaching their ears. They used the time to discuss recent events, piecing together the fragments of information they had gathered. The aphrodisiac weapon, the pirate attack, the sabotage on our ship, it's all connected, Vesta mused, her antennae twitching thoughtfully. Nolan nodded, acutely aware of their proximity in the small room. Despite the gravity of the situation, he found himself drawn to Vesta's presence, the subtle scent of her alien physiology both calming and exciting. Their theorizing was interrupted by the arrival of a tall, imposing figure. The newcomer's iridescent scales marked him as a Zinthari, his bearing that of a seasoned diplomat. "I am Thalcor," he introduced himself. "The situation is grave. The Crimson Helix has infiltrated deeper than we ever imagined. We need your help." Thalcor explained the Confederation's state of emergency, the ongoing loyalty checks, and the value of Nolan and Vesta's unique experiences. Then he presented them with a daring proposal to go undercover as a mated pair and infiltrate a black market on Nexus 6, a known front for Crimson Helix operations. "Your mission, should you choose to accept it, will be to gather concrete evidence of the organization's activities and identify key members," Thalcor explained. "Your unusual pairing will draw attention without raising immediate suspicion in circles where interspecies relations are more accepted." Nolan and Vesta exchanged a look, unspoken communication passing between them. The dangers were clear, but so was the necessity of their mission. "We'll do it," Nolan said firmly, Vesta nodding in agreement. What followed was a whirlwind of preparation. They underwent intensive training in advanced espionage techniques, pushing their physical and mental limits. Subdermal implants were inserted, allowing for covert communication with Confederation handlers. As part of their cover, they participated in a Voxari bonding ritual. What was intended as a convincing prop became something more, creating a tangible psychic link between them. Nolan felt the connection bloom in his mind, a warm presence that was undeniably Vesta. On the eve of their departure, they were approached by Dr. Lyra, the Confederation's lead xenobiologist. She handed them a small vial filled with an iridescent liquid. "This compound will enhance Vesta's pheromone production and Nolan's receptivity," she explained. "It will make your mated status more convincing. But be warned, prolonged use could lead to intense physical and emotional responses that may be difficult to control." As they boarded their modified scout ship, equipped with advanced cloaking technology, the weight of their mission settled upon them. Thalcor's final warning echoed in their minds. If caught, the Confederation would disavow all knowledge of their activities. Seated side by side in the cockpit, Nolan and Vesta prepared for the jump to hyperspace. Their hands intertwined briefly, a gesture of support and something deeper, yet unspoken. As the stars elongated into streaks of light, Nolan felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. They were plunging into the unknown, their mission vital to the future of the Galactic Confederation. But as he glanced at Vesta, her alien features set in tenacity, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The ship accelerated, carrying them towards Nexus 6 in the heart of the Crimson Helix's operations. The next phase of their adventure had begun, promising danger, intrigue, and the testing of their evolving bond. The ship emerged from hyperspace with a gentle shudder, revealing the sprawling expanse of Nexus 6. Nolan and Vesta exchanged a glance, Their earlier tension now mingled with anticipation and a hint of trepidation. "We're approaching the planet," Nolan said, his voice low as he maneuvered the scout ship towards a secluded landing zone on the outskirts of Nova Terminus. "Activating cloaking systems now." As the ship descended through the planet's atmosphere, the bustling metropolis came into view. Nova Terminus was a chaotic tapestry of alien architecture, its skyline a jumble of towering spires and low-slung structures that seemed to defy gravity. Neon signs in a dozen different languages advertised everything from exotic cuisine to illicit substances. Once safely landed, Nolan reached for the small vial Dr. Lyra had given them. "I suppose it's time to put this to use," he said, uncapping it carefully. Vesta nodded, her antennae twitching slightly. "Let's hope it's as effective as she claimed." They administered the compound, and the effects were immediate. Nolan felt a rush of warmth spread through his body, his senses sharpening to an almost painful degree. Vesta's scent, always pleasant, suddenly became intoxicating. He found himself leaning towards her unconsciously, drawn by an irresistible pull. Vesta's eyes widened, her pupils dilating as she experienced a similar surge of attraction. "Nolan," she whispered, her voice husky. "This is intense." With effort, they managed to focus on the task at hand. They donned their disguises, Nolan in the flamboyant attire of a wealthy trader, Vesta adorned with shimmering fabrics that accentuated her alien beauty. As they stepped out into the streets of Nova Terminus, the cacophony of sounds and smells assaulted their enhanced senses. Aliens of every conceivable species bustled past, some eyeing the unusual couple with curiosity. "Remember," Nolan murmured, his lips close to Vesta's auditory organ, "we're looking for the nebula's edge. Our contact should be there." They made their way through the crowded streets, their proximity to each other both comforting and distracting. Vesta's enhanced pheromones drew admiring glances from passing aliens, while Nolan found himself acutely aware of every brush of her skin against his. The nebula's edge turned out to be a dimly lit cantina, its interior hazy with smoke from a dozen different intoxicants. As they entered, conversations hushed momentarily as patrons turned to appraise the newcomers. Nolan scanned the room, his gaze settling on a Xeraxian seated at a corner table. The reptilian creature's forearms were busy manipulating a complex gambling device, its iridescent scales shimmering in the low light. "That must be Krelvox," Vesta whispered, her breath hot against Nolan's ear. They approached the table, Nolan adopting the swagger of a confident trader. "Mind if we join?" he asked, gesturing to the empty seats. Krelvox's vertical pupils narrowed as he assessed them. "Depends," he hissed. "You here to play or just waste my time?" "Oh, we're here to play," Nolan said with a grin, pulling out a chair for Vesta before taking his own seat. "How about a round of cosmic roulette?" The Xeraxian's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. "Ambitious? You know the stakes?" Vesta leaned forward, her pheromones subtly influencing the atmosphere. "We wouldn't be here if we couldn't handle them," she purred. As the game began, Nolan and Vesta worked in seamless tandem. Vesta's enhanced senses picked up on subtle tells from their opponents, while Nolan's quick thinking allowed them to capitalize on every advantage. All the while, they maintained their cover as a wealthy, adventurous couple seeking thrills in the outer colonies. Their winning streak drew attention, and soon a crowd had gathered around their table. Krelvox, initially skeptical, now watched them with undisguised interest. As the final round concluded, Nolan and Vesta found themselves with a substantial pile of local currency. The cantina erupted in cheers and muttered curses as bets were settled. Krelvox leaned back, all four arms crossed over his chest. "Impressive," he admitted. "You two are full of surprises." Nolan grinned, his arm draped casually over Vesta's shoulders. "You don't know the half of it," he said, allowing a hint of suggestion to color his tone. With the Xeraxian's guard lowered, they began to probe for information. Vesta's pheromones worked their magic, making Krelvox more talkative than he might have intended. "If you're looking for real excitement," the Xeraxian said, leaning in conspiratorially, "there's an auction coming up, very exclusive, very interesting items on offer." Nolan raised an eyebrow. Oh? And how might one secure an invitation to such an event? Krelvox chuckled, a raspy sound. Not easily, but... He paused, his gaze flicking between Nolan and Vesta. There might be a way. Madame Hexzara handles the guest list. She's always on the lookout for unique individuals. As they left the cantina with the information they needed, Nolan and Vesta found themselves grappling with the intensifying effects of the compound. The streets of Nova Terminus seemed to pulse with energy, every sensation magnified. We need to find this Madame Hexzara, Vesta said, her voice strained. But Nolan, I'm not sure how long I can... Nolan nodded, understanding her unspoken concern. The attraction between them was becoming harder to ignore with each passing moment. We'll get through this, he assured her, even as his own dedication wavered. Let's focus on the mission. As they made their way deeper into the heart of Nova Terminus, neither of them noticed the shadowy figure that detached itself from a nearby alley, following at a discreet distance. The true challenges of their mission were only just beginning, and the line between their professional facade and genuine emotions was blurring with every step. The true challenges of their mission were only just beginning, and the line between their professional facade and genuine emotions was blurring with every passing moment. As they navigated the winding streets of Nova Terminus, Nolan and Vesta's search for Madame Hexzara was cut short by an urgent transmission from their Confederation handlers. A faint energy signature had been detected in a nearby asteroid field, possibly linked to Crimson Helix activity. Change of plans, Nolan muttered, guiding Vesta towards their hidden ship. We need to investigate this lead before the auction. They boarded their vessel and departed Nova Terminus, the pulsing neon of the city fading behind them as they entered the void of space. As they approached the asteroid field, Nolan activated the ship's cloaking device, rendering them invisible to both visual and sensor detection. The energy readings are getting stronger, Vesta reported, her antennae twitching as she monitored the ship's sensors. It seems to be coming from that large asteroid at the center of the field. As they neared their destination, the alien device they had retrieved from the derelict ship began to pulse with increasing intensity. The soft blue glow it emitted pulsed in sync with the energy readings from the asteroid. I think we found something big, Nolan said, his voice tight with anticipation. They landed their ship on the asteroid's surface, the cloaking device ensuring they remained hidden from prying eyes. As they exited the airlock, the barren, rocky landscape stretched out before them. Nolan and Vesta moved cautiously, their enhanced senses on high alert for any sign of danger. It didn't take long for them to discover a hidden entrance, cleverly concealed among the asteroid's craggy surface. Using their espionage training, they bypassed the security measures and slipped inside. The interior of the asteroid was a stark contrast to its exterior. Sleek metal corridors stretched out before them, lined with pulsing lights and humming with energy. Advanced technology and mysterious artifacts filled the rooms they passed, each more intriguing than the last. This must be a secret research station, Vesta whispered, her eyes wide as she took in their surroundings. As they ventured deeper into the facility, they encountered a holographic interface that sprang to life as they approached. The alien device they carried emitted a sharp pulse, and the hologram flickered, revealing fragmented information about something called the Nexus Core. The Nexus Core, Nolan read aloud, his brow furrowed in concentration. A technology capable of manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe. This must be what the Crimson Helix is after. Before they could delve deeper into the holographic data, Nolan accidentally triggered a security protocol. Alarms blared throughout the facility, and the sound of approaching robotic guards echoed through the corridors. Time to go, Nolan said, drawing his weapon. They fought their way through waves of robotic guards, their complementary skills and enhanced abilities allowing them to move as one. Vesta's agility and precision complemented Nolan's strength and tactical thinking, creating a formidable duo. As they battled, the effects of Dr. Lyra's compound reached a fever pitch. Their coordination improved dramatically, movements becoming fluid and instinctive. However, the physical attraction between them intensified as well, creating a distracting undercurrent of tension. In the heart of the facility, they discovered a prototype of the Nexus Core. The device pulsed with an otherworldly energy, its potential power almost palpable. "We can't leave this for the Crimson Helix," Vesta said, reaching for the prototype. As soon as she lifted it from its pedestal, a new alarm sounded. A computerized voice announced the imminent self-destruction of the facility. With the prototype secured, Nolan and Vesta raced back through the facility, cutting down robotic guards as they went. They reached their ship just as the first explosions rocked the asteroid. Nolan pushed the engines to their limit as they fled, the asteroid facility exploding behind them in a spectacular display of fire and debris. The shock wave hit their ship, sending them tumbling through space. "We've lost engine power," Vesta reported, her fingers flying over the controls. "We need to make an emergency landing." They limped towards a nearby moon, their damaged ship barely responding to Nolan's commands. They crashed onto the desolate surface, the ship skidding across the barren landscape before coming to a stop. As the dust settled, Nolan and Vesta surveyed their situation. Their ship was no longer space-worthy, leaving them stranded on the hostile moon. With limited resources and the valuable Nexus Core prototype in their possession, they faced a daunting challenge. They set up a makeshift camp near their damaged vessel, using survival gear from the emergency kit. The moon's thin atmosphere and extreme temperature fluctuations made their situation even more precarious. As night fell, bringing with it plummeting temperatures, Nolan and Vesta huddled together in their small shelter. The prolonged physical contact, combined with the lingering effects of the pheromone compound, brought their mutual attraction to a boiling point. "We need to focus on the mission," Nolan said, his voice strained as he fought against the urge to pull Vesta closer. Vesta nodded, her antennae quivering with suppressed emotion. "You're right. Let's start on the repairs first thing in the morning." As they drifted into an uneasy sleep, neither of them noticed the faint blip on their ship's damaged long-range scanner, a signal that indicated they were no longer alone in this desolate corner of space. Space. The realization sent a chill down Nolan's spine, but exhaustion soon overtook him, and he drifted into an uneasy sleep. As the first light of dawn crept over the desolate moon's horizon, Nolan stirred, his body aching from the cramped confines of their makeshift shelter. Beside him, Vesta was already awake, her antennae twitching as she scanned their surroundings. "We need to start repairs immediately," she said, her voice tight with urgency. Nolan nodded, pushing aside the lingering effects of sleep and the ever-present pull of attraction. They emerged from their shelter, the harsh landscape stretching out before them. The temperature had already begun to rise, the thin atmosphere offering little protection from the moon's primary star. They set to work without delay, Nolan focusing on the ship's propulsion systems while Vesta tackled the communication array. The task was daunting, their tools limited to what they could salvage from the emergency supplies. As Nolan wrestled with a damaged thruster, he felt a sudden surge of strength course through his body. He paused, perplexed, as he effortlessly lifted a piece of machinery that should have been far too heavy for him to manage alone. "Vesta," he called out, "are you experiencing any changes?" The Voxer turned to him, her eyes wide. "Yes," she replied, her antennae quivering. "My senses, they're heightened. I can detect microfractures in the hull that were invisible before." Their eyes fell on the Nexus Core prototype, which had begun emitting a low-frequency pulse. The alien technology in their bodies seemed to be resonating with the device, amplifying their abilities in unexpected ways. They worked tirelessly, their enhanced abilities accelerating their progress. Yet with each passing moment, the physical attraction between them intensified. Nolan found himself hyper-aware of Vesta's movements, the grace with which she manipulated delicate circuitry. Vesta, in turn, couldn't help but admire the play of muscles beneath Nolan's skin as he worked. As midday approached, a sharp beep from their partially repaired sensor array cut through the air. Vesta rushed to the console, her fingers flying over the controls. "Multiple ships entering orbit," she reported, her voice tense. "It's the Crimson Helix recovery team. They're here earlier than we anticipated." Nolan cursed under his breath. "How long until they reach us?" Vesta's antennae twitched as she analyzed the data. "Based on their search pattern, we have less than an hour before they discover our location." They redoubled their efforts, pushing their enhanced abilities to the limit. Sweat beaded on Nolan's brow as he made the final adjustments to the propulsion system. Vesta's hands moved in a blur as she rerouted power to the essential systems. "That's the best we can do," Nolan said, wiping his forehead. "Basic flight capabilities and partial cloaking. It'll have to be enough." They quickly gathered their supplies in the Nexus Core prototype, securing everything for what promised to be a rough takeoff. As they strapped themselves into the cockpit, the ship's sensors blared a warning. "They've detected us," Vesta said, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Crimson Helix ships are converging on our position." Nolan gritted his teeth and fired up the engines. The ship shuddered and groaned but lifted off the moon's surface. They broke atmosphere just as the first Crimson Helix vessel came into view. "Hang on," Nolan warned as he pushed the damaged ship to its limits, weaving through the oncoming fire. Their smaller, more agile ship allowed them to outmaneuver the larger Crimson Helix vessels, but their weapon systems were offline, leaving them defenseless. As they dove and rolled, avoiding barrage after barrage, the Nexus Core prototype suddenly flared to life. A shimmering energy field enveloped their ship, its boundaries shifting and pulsing. Nolan felt a strange connection to the controls, as if the ship had become an extension of his own body. "What's happening?" Vesta asked, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and concern. Before Nolan could respond, he instinctively banked the ship into an impossible turn, narrowly avoiding a volley of energy blasts. The maneuver should have torn their damaged vessel apart, but instead they passed through space unscathed. "I don't know," Nolan replied, "but I'm not questioning it. Hold on." He piloted the ship towards a dense asteroid field, a move that would have been suicidal under normal circumstances. But with the Nexus Core's energy field surrounding them and their enhanced abilities in full effect, they weaved through the rocky maze with impossible precision. Vesta managed the ship's energy distribution, her heightened senses allowing her to anticipate power fluctuations before they occurred. "The Crimson Helix ships are falling behind," she reported. "They can't navigate the asteroid field at our speed." As they emerged from the other side of the asteroid field, a blinding flash of light engulfed them. When it faded, the familiar stars had been replaced by an alien sky. "Where are we?" Nolan asked, his voice hushed. Vesta checked the navigation system, her antennae twitching in confusion. "We've been transported to a different sector of space, far from the moon and Nexus 6. As they took stock of their situation, they detected a habitable planet nearby. With their ship damaged and their bearings lost, they had little choice but to land and reassess. As they entered the planet's atmosphere, they were greeted by the sight of sprawling cities and advanced technology. But their sensors also detected high levels of conflict and unrest on the surface. "We need to find a safe place to land and make repairs," Nolan said, guiding the ship towards a remote area covered in dense alien foliage. They touched down in a clearing, the ship's cloaking device sputtering as they powered down the engines. As they emerged from the vessel, they found themselves in a lush alien forest. Twin suns cast an otherworldly light through the canopy, illuminating bioluminescent plants that pulsed with ethereal energy. Nolan and Vesta stepped onto the alien soil, their enhanced senses overwhelmed by the new environment. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, and the sounds of alien wildlife echoed through the trees. As they began to secure their landing site, movement in the underbrush caught their attention. They froze, hands moving to their weapons, as a group of beings emerged from the forest. The creatures were unlike anything Nolan and Vesta had encountered before. Insectoid in nature, they stood on two legs, their bodies covered in iridescent exoskeletons. Compound eyes regarded the newcomers with what seemed to be a mixture of curiosity and caution. One of the beings, slightly larger than the others and adorned with intricate markings, stepped forward. It made a series of clicking sounds that their universal translators struggled to interpret. Nolan and Vesta exchanged glances, the lingering effects of their enhanced pheromones adding an extra layer of tension to the moment. They were stranded on an unknown planet. Their mission had taken an unexpected turn, and now they faced a new alien species. As the insectoid beings surrounded them, Nolan and Vesta knew that their next actions would be crucial, not just for their mission, but for their very survival. Survival. As the tension mounted, Vesta stepped forward, her antennae twitching in a complex pattern. To everyone's surprise, the lead insectoid's markings began to glow in response. "I believe I can communicate with them," Vesta said, her voice low. "Their language seems to be based on a combination of pheromones and bioluminescent signals." Nolan nodded, keeping his hand near his weapon but not drawing it. "Do what you can. We need allies, not enemies." Vesta's antennae continued their intricate dance, emitting subtle pheromones that the universal translator couldn't detect. The lead insectoid's markings pulsed in response, creating a silent dialogue that lasted several minutes. Finally, Vesta turned to Nolan. "They call themselves the Zenth. Their leader, Zilara, has invited us to their settlement. They're curious about our presence and technology." As they followed the Zenth through the dense alien forest, Nolan and Vesta found themselves drawn closer together. The lingering effects of the pheromone-enhancing compound made every accidental brush of their hands or shoulders feel electric. The Zenth settlement was a marvel of organic architecture, with structures that seemed to grow from the very trees themselves. Bioluminescent fungi provided soft, pulsating light as night fell. Zilara led them to a circular chamber where other Zenth gathered. Through Vesta's translation, they learned of a civil war tearing the Zenth society apart. At the heart of the conflict was an ancient artifact of immense power, one that bore an uncanny resemblance to the Nexus Core prototype. As they settled into a makeshift camp for the night, the twin suns of this alien world dipped below the horizon, plunging the forest into darkness, broken only by the glow of bioluminescent life. Nolan and Vesta lay side by side in their shelter, hyper-aware of each other's presence. "We should rest," Nolan said, his voice strained. "Tomorrow will be challenging." Vesta nodded, her antennae quivering slightly. "Agreed. We need to be at our best." Despite their words, sleep proved elusive. The compound in their system seemed to intensify with each passing hour, their enhanced senses making them acutely aware of every breath, every subtle movement. As dawn broke, casting an otherworldly light through the canopy, Nolan and Vesta emerged from their shelter. The effects of the pheromone-enhancing compound had reached new heights overnight, making their physical attraction almost unbearable. Nolan clenched his fists, forcing himself to focus on their surroundings. "We need to investigate this Zenth artifact. If it's connected to the Nexus Core, it could be the key to understanding what's happening to us." Vesta nodded, her antennae twitching with scarcely controlled energy. "Agreed, but we must be cautious. The political situation here is volatile." As if summoned by her words, Zilara approached their camp, flanked by several other Zenth. The insectoid leader's markings pulsed with urgency. Vesta's antennae danced as she interpreted the pheromone signals. "Zilara says the opposing faction, led by someone named Krastor, is planning to use the artifact as a weapon. They believe it could end the civil war, but at a catastrophic cost." Nolan's eyes widened. If it's anything like the Nexus Core, that kind of power could have consequences far beyond this planet. Zilara's compound eyes seemed to bore into them, her markings flashing in a complex pattern. Vesta translated, "She's asking for our help. They want to secure the artifact before Krastor can weaponize it." Nolan and Vesta exchanged a glance, their mission to understand their own transformation momentarily overshadowed by the urgent need to prevent a potential disaster. "Tell her we'll help," Nolan said, reaching for his gear, "but we need to know everything they can tell us about this artifact." As they prepared to leave, Nolan felt a surge of strength course through his body. He lifted their supply pack with ease, the weight feeling inconsequential. Beside him, Vesta's antennae twitched rapidly, her eyes darting around the clearing. "My senses," she whispered. "They're heightened. I can detect minute vibrations in the air, faint scents I've never noticed before." Nolan nodded, feeling the familiar pulse of the Nexus Core prototype in their possession. "It's affecting us again. Let's hope these enhancements help us on this mission." They set out with Shilara's group, moving swiftly through the alien forest towards the Zenth capital city. The journey was treacherous, with carnivorous plants and predatory creatures lurking in the shadows. Nolan's enhanced strength allowed him to clear obstacles and protect the group, while Vesta's heightened senses warned them of hidden dangers. As they neared the outskirts of the city, a patrol of Krastor's forces ambushed them. The air filled with the hum of energy weapons and the click-clack of Zenth battle stances. Nolan and Vesta moved in perfect synchronization, their training and enhanced abilities making them a formidable duo. Nolan's strength allowed him to overpower the larger Zenth warriors, while Vesta's agility and precision made her attacks devastatingly effective. The skirmish ended quickly, leaving Zilara's group victorious but wary of increased patrols. As they caught their breath, Nolan and Vesta found themselves standing close, the heat of battle and their ongoing physical attraction creating a palpable tension between them. Zilara's markings pulsed, drawing their attention. Vesta translated, "She says there's an abandoned outpost ahead. We can rest and regroup there before entering the city." The outpost was a small cluster of organic structures, partially reclaimed by the forest. As the group searched for supplies, Nolan and Vesta found themselves alone in a cramped storage room. The close proximity, combined with the adrenaline from the recent fight and the ever-present effects of the pheromone compound, pushed them to the brink. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the mission, the dangers, everything else faded away. Nolan leaned in, his hand cupping Vesta's face. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, years of tension finally giving way. The sensation was electric, their enhanced senses making every touch, every breath feel magnified. Just as they began to lose themselves in the moment, Zilara's urgent clicks echoed through the outpost. They broke apart, breathing heavily, the reality of their situation crashing back into focus. "We should—" Nolan started, his voice rough. "Yes," Vesta agreed, her antennae quivering. "The mission. We need to focus." They rejoined the group, a new undercurrent of tension between them. Zilara's compound eyes seemed to study them for a moment before she turned, leading them towards a hidden entrance to the city. As they made their way through winding tunnels beneath the Zenth capital, Nolan and Vesta's enhanced abilities proved invaluable. Vesta's acute hearing detected patrols long before they came into view, while Nolan's strength allowed them to move through partially collapsed sections of the tunnel system. They emerged in the heart of the city, the research facility where the artifact was held looming before them. But as they approached, alarms began to sound throughout the complex. "They're activating it," Vesta translated Zilara's urgent pheromone signals. "Krastor's forces are already inside." Nolan's eyebrows furrowed. "Then we don't have a moment to lose. Let's move!" They charged towards the facility, the fate of not just the Zenth, but potentially much more, hanging in the balance. As they breached the outer defenses, the air around them began to crackle with strange energy, the Nexus Core prototype pulsing in response to the awakening Zenth artifact. Nolan and Vesta exchanged a look, knowing that whatever lay ahead would change everything. With Zilara and her forces at their side, they plunged into the chaos of the research facility, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. As Nolan and Vesta plunged deeper into the research facility, the air crackled with an otherworldly energy. The Nexus Core prototype pulsed in sync with the awakening Zenth artifact, creating a disorienting field of power that made their skin tingle and their enhanced senses go haywire. They fought their way through Krastor's forces, their movements fluid and synchronized. Nolan's strength allowed him to tear through reinforced doors, while Vesta's heightened senses guided them through the labyrinthine corridors. Finally, they reached the central chamber. The Zenth artifact floated in a containment field, its surface rippling with strange symbols. As they approached, the Nexus Core prototype began to vibrate violently. "We need to shut it down," Nolan shouted over the rising hum of energy. Vesta's antennae twitched as she analyzed the control panel. "I can't. The systems are locked." Suddenly, a beam of energy shot from the Zenth artifact, enveloping Nolan and Vesta. They felt themselves lifted off the ground, their bodies tingling with an intense, almost painful sensation. Zilara and her team watched in awe as a cocoon of pure energy formed around the couple. The Zenth leader's markings pulsed with concern and fascination. For hours, the energy cocoon pulsated, growing brighter and more intense. Nolan and Vesta were vaguely aware of each other's presence, their minds brushing against one another in the swirling vortex of power. Then, with a final, blinding flash, The cocoon dissipated. Nolan and Vesta dropped to the floor, their bodies transformed. Nolan's skin now had a faint metallic sheen, while Vesta's antennae had grown longer and more complex. Their eyes, when they opened, held an otherworldly glow. As they regained consciousness, a flood of sensations overwhelmed them. They could feel each other's presence not just physically, but mentally. Vesta, Nolan thought, and to his surprise, he heard her response in his mind. I'm here, Nolan. I can feel you. They stood marveling at their new forms. The lingering effects of the pheromone-enhancing compound seemed to have stabilized, allowing them to control their attraction with newfound ease. Zilari approached cautiously, her markings pulsing with a mix of awe and apprehension. Vesta's enhanced abilities allowed her to interpret the complex pheromone signals without effort. The civil war is over, Vesta relayed to Nolan telepathically. Krastor's faction surrendered after witnessing the power of the combined artifacts. Nolan nodded, processing the information. He turned to the control panel, his fingers moving with inhuman speed and precision. We need to secure these artifacts. I have a feeling we're not the only ones interested in their power. As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the facility. Silara's markings flashed urgently. Off-world factions, Vesta translated. They've detected the energy surge. We have multiple ships entering the system. Nolan and Vesta shared a look, their newfound connection allowing them to formulate a plan without words. They approached the Zenth artifact, their hybrid physiology allowing them to interface directly with the ancient technology. A flood of information poured into their minds, images of a long-lost civilization, schematics of a vast machine that could bend the very fabric of reality. They realized that the Zenth artifact and the Nexus Core prototype were merely components of something far greater and more terrifying. We can't let this fall into the wrong hands, Nolan thought, and Vesta nodded in agreement. They worked quickly, Nolan using his enhanced strength and technical skills to modify their ship, incorporating Zenth technology to boost its capabilities. Vesta, with her heightened senses and new affinity for the artifacts, created a shielding system to mask their energy signatures. As they made final preparations, long-range sensors detected a mix of Crimson Helix vessels and Galactic Confederation peacekeeping forces entering orbit. We need to leave now, Vesta urged, her antennae twitching with nervous energy. They bid a hasty farewell to Silara, promising to return someday with answers. The Zenth leader provided them with data crystals containing historical records related to the artifacts. Just as they boarded their ship, a squadron of Crimson Helix fighters breached the atmosphere. Nolan took the controls, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to pilot with unprecedented skill. They shot out of the planet's atmosphere, weaving through a barrage of enemy fire. Vesta managed the ship's new systems, using the artifact's power to create localized space-time distortions that confused the enemy's targeting systems. As they broke orbit, they encountered a Confederation cruiser. The comm system crackled to life, and a familiar voice filled the cockpit. This is Admiral Zorn of the Galactic Confederation. Nolan, Vesta, stand down and prepare to be boarded. Nolan and Vesta exchanged a glance, knowing they couldn't risk capture. Using a combination of their ship's new Zenth-based technology and the artifact's reality-altering capabilities, they created a temporary wormhole. Hold on, Nolan thought to Vesta as he piloted the ship into the swirling vortex. The wormhole collapsed behind them, leaving their pursuers in disarray. They emerged in an uncharted sector of space, far from any known civilizations. As the adrenaline of their escape faded, Nolan and Vesta took stock of their situation. Their bodies had changed, their relationship had evolved, and they now possessed artifacts of unimaginable power. Where do we go from here? Vesta asked, both verbally and mentally. Nolan gazed out at the star-filled expanse before them. We find answers, he replied, setting a course for a distant nebula, and we keep these artifacts safe, despite the toll. Their ship streaked across the cosmos, carrying them towards an uncertain future filled with danger, discovery, and the promise of unlocking the greatest mysteries of the universe. As they ventured deeper into uncharted space, the vastness of their new reality began to sink in. Days passed as Nolan and Vesta traveled through the cosmic expanse, their ship's engines humming steadily. They used this time to further explore their newfound abilities, marveling at the changes wrought by their encounter with the Zenth artifact. Nolan sat at the helm, his fingers dancing over the controls with inhuman precision. He felt the ship's systems as extensions of his own body, the faint metallic sheen of his skin reflecting the starlight streaming through the viewscreen. Vesta stood beside him, her elongated antennae twitching as she processed the wealth of information flooding her enhanced senses. "Nolan," she said, her voice tinged with excitement, "I'm detecting something ahead, a massive stellar formation." As if on cue, their ship emerged from hyperspace near the edge of a vast, swirling nebula. The sight took their breath away. A kaleidoscope of vibrant gases and stellar nurseries stretched as far as the eye could see. "It's beautiful," Nolan whispered, both aloud and through their mental link. Vesta nodded, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "And the perfect hiding spot. The nebula's composition should mask our energy signature." With practiced ease, Nolan guided their vessel into a dense pocket of the nebula. The colorful gases enveloped them, providing a natural cloak against prying eyes and sensors. Once safely hidden, they began to explore their newfound abilities in earnest. Nolan discovered he could manipulate gravitational fields to a limited degree, causing small objects in the ship to float and dance at his will. Vesta's empathic abilities expanded exponentially, allowing her to sense life forms at incredible distances. They spent days honing these skills, their telepathic link growing stronger with each passing hour. As they trained, they also pored over the data crystals provided by Zalara, uncovering the ancient history of the artifacts they now possessed. "The precursors," Vesta said, her antennae twitching as she absorbed the information, "an ancient race with the power to manipulate reality itself." Nolan nodded, his eyes scanning the holographic displays. "And these artifacts, the Nexus core components, were their tools for seeding life throughout the galaxy." As they delved deeper into the precursor knowledge, a chilling realization dawned on them. The components they possessed were part of a larger network scattered across the galaxy. If brought together, they could grant godlike powers over space, time, and matter. "We can't let this fall into the wrong hand," Nolan said, echoing his earlier sentiment with newfound gravity. Vesta agreed, her mind brushing against his. "We need to find the other components before anyone else does." Using the artifacts in their possession, they crafted a rudimentary tracking system. Almost immediately, it detected a faint energy signature emanating from a nearby star system. Before they could investigate further, the ship's sensors blared to life. An incoming vessel was approaching, its trajectory precise and purposeful despite the nebula's interference. Nolan's hands flew over the controls, preparing for evasive action. But Vesta placed a gentle hand on his arm, her antennae quivering. "Wait," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "I'm not sensing any hostile intent. There's something else, something ancient and powerful." The newcomer revealed itself to be a sleek, advanced scout ship of unknown origin. It maneuvered through the nebula with impossible grace, coming to a stop near their vessel. A transmission crackled through their comm system. "Greetings, bearers of the Nexus core," a melodious voice echoed through the cockpit. "I am Zephyra of the Guardians, last survivors of the precursor civilization. We have much to discuss." Nolan and Vesta exchanged a look, their mental link buzzing with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. As Zephyra's ship docked with theirs, they steeled themselves for whatever revelations awaited them. The airlock hissed open, revealing a tall, ethereal being with translucent skin that shimmered like starlight. Zephyra stepped aboard, her movements fluid and graceful. Her eyes filled with ancient wisdom, studied Nolan and Vesta intently. "Fascinating," she murmured, circling them. "Your transformation is unlike anything I've seen in millennia. The Nexus core has changed you in ways we never anticipated." Nolan felt a strange tingling sensation as Zephyra's gaze passed over him. "You said you're a guardian? What exactly does that mean?" Zephyra's lips curved into a smile. "We are the protectors of the Nexus core components sworn to prevent their misuse. I sensed the activation of the artifacts on the Zenth homeworld and tracked you here. She turned to face them both, her expression growing serious. The Crimson Helix and factions within the Galactic Confederation seek to weaponize this technology. If they succeed, entire civilizations could be wiped from existence. Vesta's antennae twitched nervously. What can we do to stop them? I offer you training, Zafira replied, her voice resonating with power. To master your new abilities and learn the true nature of the Nexus core. Only then can you hope to protect it and uncover the full legacy of the precursors. Nolan and Vesta shared a moment of silent communication through their link. The weight of the responsibility before them was immense, but they knew they couldn't turn away. We accept, Nolan said, speaking for them both. Zafira nodded, a look of approval crossing her features. Then let us begin. Time is of the essence, but fear not. I have ways of making it bend to our will. With a gesture, Zafira activated a device on her wrist. The space around their ships shimmered and warped, creating a temporal bubble that isolated them from the normal flow of time. As Nolan and Vesta prepared for their training, they couldn't help but feel that they stood on the precipice of something monumental. The destiny of the universe hung in the balance, and their journey was only just beginning. As Nolan and Vesta prepared for their training with Zafira, the universe around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next chapter of their extraordinary journey to unfold. Months passed within the temporal bubble, though only moments ticked by in the outside world. Under Zafira's guidance, Nolan and Vesta honed their new abilities, pushing the boundaries of their hybrid physiology. As their training neared its end, Zafira provided them with coordinates to a hidden precursor outpost. This facility may hold the key to locating the remaining Nexus core components, Zafira explained, but be cautious. The outpost's defenses may still be active after all this time. With newfound confidence in their abilities, Nolan and Vesta bid farewell to their guardian mentor and set course for the mysterious outpost. Their ship cut through the fabric of space, emerging from hyperspace near a small, rocky planetoid orbiting a red dwarf star. As they approached, Vesta's enhanced senses detected a faint, shimmering energy field surrounding the planetoid. "Nolan, look," she said, gesturing to the view screen. "It's some kind of cloaking technology." Nolan nodded, his fingers dancing over the controls. "Precursor tech, designed to hide the outpost. We'll need to create an opening if we want to land." Working in tandem, they focused their energies on the Nexus core components they carried. Nolan manipulated the gravitational fields while Vesta used her empathic abilities to interpret the energy patterns. Slowly, a small gap formed in the shimmering barrier. "That's our window," Nolan said, carefully maneuvering their ship through the opening. They landed on the planetoid's barren surface, the red dwarf's dim light casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. After donning their protective suits, they exited the ship and made their way towards a barely visible entrance, carved into a nearby cliff face. Centuries of debris and rock formations partially obscured the ancient doorway. Nolan stepped forward, his enhanced muscles tensing as he began to clear away the obstacles. Boulders that would have been impossible for a normal human to budge now moved with relative ease under his touch. Meanwhile, Vesta's antennae twitched as she scanned for hidden dangers. "I'm not detecting any active security measures," she reported, "but there's an ancient locking mechanism on the door. It's unlike anything I've seen before." They approached the entrance, studying the intricate patterns etched into its surface. Nolan traced the designs with his fingers, his technologically enhanced mind processing the complex algorithms hidden within the seemingly decorative swirls. "It's a puzzle," he muttered. "We need to activate the correct sequence to unlock it." Vesta placed her hand next to Nolan's, closing her eyes as she extended her empathic senses. "I can feel echoes of the precursor's intentions," she said softly. "Their hopes, their fears. It's all encoded here." Together they worked to decipher the lock, Nolan's technical expertise complementing Vesta's intuitive understanding of the precursor's mindset. With a final series of precise movements, the ancient door slid open with a groan of long-dormant mechanisms. The couple stepped into the vast underground complex, their suit lights illuminating technology in various states of decay. Crystalline structures pulsed with faint energy, while defunct robotic assistants lay scattered across the floor. As they carefully made their way deeper into the facility, Nolan and Vesta documented their findings using their suits' recording devices. They passed through laboratories filled with strange, half-finished experiments and libraries containing data storage units beyond their comprehension. Finally, they reached the heart of the outpost, a central computer core that towered above them, its surface covered in pulsing lights and complex circuitry. Despite the passage of eons, the core hummed with life. "This is it," Nolan said, his voice filled with awe. "If we can access this, we might find the locations of the other Nexus core components." They approached the computer core, searching for an interface point. Vesta found a panel that responded to her touch, causing a holographic display to flicker to life before them. Strange alien symbols danced across the projection. "I can't make sense of this," Nolan admitted, frustration evident in his voice. Vesta placed a comforting hand on his arm. "Let's try something different. Our telepathic link. Maybe we can use it to process the data together." Nodding in agreement, Nolan and Vesta joined hands, focusing on strengthening their mental connection. As one, they reached out to the computer core, allowing the alien data streams to flow through their joined consciousness. Hours passed as they stood motionless, their minds racing to interpret the vast amounts of information flooding their senses. Slowly, the precursor data began to coalesce into recognizable patterns. Suddenly, their eyes snapped open, both gasping as the full weight of their discovery hit them. "3 more components," Nolan said, his voice hoarse. Vesta nodded, her antennae quivering with tension. "And the Crimson Helix already has one. They're closing in on another." Before they could discuss their findings further, a low rumble echoed through the facility. The computer core's lights flashed red, and alarms began to blare. "What's happening?" Vesta shouted over the noise. Nolan's eyes widened as he interpreted the warning signals. "The defense systems! They've identified us as a threat!" As if on cue, hidden compartments in the walls slid open, revealing swarms of small spherical robots. The machines surrounded Nolan and Vesta, their surfaces crackling with energy as they prepared to attack. Nolan reacted instantly, extending his hands and concentrating on manipulating the gravitational fields around them. A shimmering bubble of warped space formed, deflecting the first wave of robotic attackers. Vesta closed her eyes, focusing her empathic powers on the robot's targeting systems. The machines began to twitch and jerk erratically, crashing into each other and the walls. "We need to get out of here," Nolan shouted, maintaining the protective field as they began to fight their way back towards the entrance. The couple moved in perfect synchronization, their hybrid abilities complementing each other as they faced increasingly dangerous security measures. Laser grids and gravity traps sprang to life around them, forcing Nolan and Vesta to push their newfound skills to the limit. As they neared the exit, a massive shape loomed before them, a Guardian robot, far more advanced than the smaller drones they'd faced. Its adaptive programming allowed it to analyze their movements, making it a formidable opponent. The Guardian unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, forcing Nolan to drop their protective field and dodge. Vesta leaped into action, using her enhanced agility to distract the robot while Nolan looked for a weakness. As the battle intensified, Nolan felt a surge of energy coursing through his body. Acting on instinct, he reached out through their telepathic link, channeling his strength to Vesta. Her eyes widened as she felt the power flow into her muscles tensing with newfound strength. In turn, Vesta extended her empathic abilities to Nolan, allowing him to sense the Guardian's intentions moments before it acted. This newfound synergy turned the tide of the battle. Moving as one, Nolan and Vesta unleashed a combined assault on the Guardian robot. Vesta's empathically enhanced strikes found weak points in its armor, while Nolan used his gravity manipulation to amplify the force of each blow. With a final resounding crash, the Guardian collapsed, its systems overloaded by the couple's unexpected display of power. Exhausted but victorious, Nolan and Vesta stumbled back to their ship, the vital information from the computer core secured in their suits' databanks. As they prepared for takeoff, proximity alarms blared to life. Multiple ships entering the system, Nolan reported, his hands flying over the controls. Crimson Helix and Galactic Confederation signatures. Vesta's mind raced as she assessed their options. We can't fight them all. We need a diversion. A plan formed in their shared consciousness. Using the Nexus core components they possessed, Nolan and Vesta focused their energies on creating a localized time dilation field around their ship. As the enemy vessels closed in, Nolan engaged the engines. From the perspective of their pursuers, the couple's ship seemed to move at impossible speeds, becoming little more than a blur as it weaved between the incoming vessels. In a matter of seconds, they cleared the planetoid's orbit and made the jump to hyperspace, leaving their bewildered attackers behind. Safe for the moment, Nolan and Vesta set a course for the coordinates of the nearest unsecured Nexus core component. As their ship streaked through the cosmos, they took a moment to catch their breath and process the events at the precursor outpost. We're changing, Vesta said softly, examining her hands. With each challenge, our abilities grow stronger, more intertwined. Nolan nodded, his expression a mix of wonder and concern. We're becoming something new. Neither human nor Alpha, something unique in the universe. As they journeyed towards their next destination, Nolan and Vesta knew that the hope of the universe rested on their shoulders. The Crimson Helix grew more powerful with each artifact they acquired, and even the Galactic Confederation couldn't be fully trusted. Their ship raced through hyperspace, carrying them toward the next phase of their mission. The couple stood at the threshold of a new chapter in their lives, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together. Together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As their ship hurtled through hyperspace, Nolan and Vesta pored over the data they had retrieved from the precursor outpost. The coordinates of the nearest unsecured Nexus core component led them to an uncharted star system dominated by a massive gas giant. As they dropped out of hyperspace, the planet's swirling storms filled their view screen, its sheer size dwarfing their vessel. Vesta's antennae twitched as she studied the sensor readings. There, she said, pointing to one of the gas giant's moons. I'm detecting a faint energy signature consistent with Nexus core technology. Nolan nodded, his enhanced vision zooming in on the moon's surface. It looks like a challenging environment. Dense jungles, vast oceans. This won't be an easy retrieval. As they approached the moon, their sensors picked up another reading. Nolan's brow furrowed as he analyzed the data. Vesta, we've got company. There's another ship already on the surface, and the energy signature matches Crimson Helix technology. Vesta's expression hardened. They're after the component too. We need to move quickly. Nolan piloted their ship towards a clearing near the detected energy source, engaging their cloaking field as they descended through the moon's atmosphere. The dense canopy of alien vegetation parted as they touched down, the ship's landing strut sinking slightly into the marshy ground. As they exited the ship, the moon's humid air hit them like a wall. Nolan felt his muscles tense, adjusting to the slightly higher gravity. Beside him, Vesta's skin shimmer as it adapted to the new environment. This way, Vesta said, her heightened senses guiding them towards the artifact's location. Nolan took point, using his enhanced strength to clear a path through the tangled undergrowth. Vines as thick as his arms snapped under his touch, while Vesta's empathic abilities warned them of potential dangers lurking in the alien ecosystem. They encountered bizarre life forms as they trekked deeper into the jungle. Phosphorescent insects swarmed around them, their light pulsing in hypnotic patterns. A creature resembling a cross between a giant sloth and a chameleon watched them pass with multifaceted eyes, its camouflage hide rippling as it blended seamlessly with the surrounding foliage. As they neared their destination, the vegetation grew denser, the trees towering hundreds of meters above them. Nolan paused, his technologically enhanced mind processing their surroundings. "Do you see that?" he asked, pointing to a barely visible structure beneath the massive roots. Vesta squinted, then nodded. It's precursor architecture, but it's unlike anything we've encountered before. They approached the ancient building, its smooth, iridescent surface seeming to shift and change as they drew closer. The entrance was nearly hidden by the gnarled roots of the colossal trees, but Nolan and Vesta managed to squeeze through. Inside, they found themselves in a vast chamber filled with dormant precursor technology. Holographic displays flickered to life as they passed, responding to their presence. Nolan and Vesta worked in tandem, their combined knowledge of the Nexus core allowing them to decipher the alien symbols and mechanisms they encountered. As they progressed deeper into the complex, the energy signature grew stronger. They entered a central chamber and found the Nexus core component suspended in a shimmering containment field. But they weren't alone. A squad of Crimson Helix operatives, led by the imposing figure of Commander Zarkoth, was already there, working to disable the security systems. The draconian commander's reptilian eyes narrowed as he spotted Nolan and Vesta. "Seize them!" Zarkoth roared, his scales dripping with anger. The chamber erupted into chaos. Nolan reacted instantly, manipulating gravity to create a protective barrier around them as energy blasts from Crimson Helix weapons filled the air. Vesta focused her empathic powers, projecting waves of confusion and disorientation towards their attackers. As the battle raged, the Nexus core component began to pulse with energy, reacting to the presence of the artifacts Nolan and Vesta carried. Suddenly, a blinding flash filled the chamber, and all advanced technology went dead. In the sudden silence, Nolan and Vesta exchanged a quick glance. Their hybrid physiology gave them a distinct advantage in close-quarters combat. They moved as one, engaging the Crimson Helix operatives with a fluid grace that belied their deadly efficiency. Nolan grappled with Zarkoth, the Draconian's natural strength nearly matching his enhanced muscles. They traded blows that would have shattered ordinary bones, the sound of their combat echoing through the chamber. Meanwhile, Vesta fought her way towards the containment field holding the Nexus core component. Her Alfari agility allowed her to dodge and weave through the remaining Crimson Helix forces, her strikes precise and devastating. As the fight continued, the energy fluctuations from the Nexus core components intensified. The ancient structure began to shake, dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. Cracks appeared in the walls, spreading rapidly. "Nolan!" Vesta called out, her hand closing around the Nexus core component. "We need to leave now." Nolan delivered a final, crushing blow to Zarkoth, sending the Draconian commander staggering back. He sprinted towards Vesta, using his gravity manipulation to clear a path through the collapsing chamber. They emerged from the precursor structure just as it imploded, the entrance sealing behind them and trapping the remaining Crimson Helix forces inside. Without pausing to catch their breath, Nolan and Vesta raced back through the jungle toward their ship. Vesta's antennae twitched as they ran. "Multiple Crimson Helix ships entering the atmosphere," she warned. They reached their vessel just as the first enemy ships appeared on the horizon. Nolan leapt into the pilot's seat, his fingers dancing over the controls as he brought the engines online. The ship lifted off, darting into a series of deep canyons to avoid detection. Vesta worked furiously to integrate the new Nexus core component with the others they possessed. As energy coursed through the artifacts, she felt a surge of power unlike anything she had experienced before. "Nolan," she called out, her voice tight with concentration. "I think I can create a wormhole. It won't last long, but it should get us out of here." Nolan nodded, expertly maneuvering their ship through the twisting canyons as Crimson Helix vessels gave chase. "Do it!" Vesta closed her eyes, channeling the combined power of the Nexus core components. The space in front of their ship shimmered and tore open, revealing a swirling vortex of energy. As they plunged into the wormhole, Nolan and Vesta felt an intense connection, their hybrid physiologies resonating with the raw power of the Nexus core. For a moment, they were one being, their thoughts and emotions intertwined in a way that transcended physical boundaries. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the wormhole collapsed. Their ship emerged in a distant star system, far from any known Confederation or Crimson Helix territory. As the adrenaline of their escape faded, exhaustion set in. Nolan slumped in his seat, his enhanced muscles trembling from exertion. "We did it," he said, his voice hoarse. Vesta nodded, her antennae drooping with fatigue. "But at what cost? We're drained, and we don't know where we are." They scanned their surroundings, looking for a safe place to rest and recover. A nearby habitable planet caught their attention, offering the promise of sanctuary. As they set course for the planet, Their long-range sensors picked up an unusual energy signature. "It's not a Nexus core component," Nolan said, studying the readings, "but it bears similarities to precursor technology." Vesta straightened in her seat, a mix of curiosity and wariness in her eyes. "Should we investigate?" Nolan considered for a moment, then nodded. "We need to know what we're dealing with. But first, let's find a secure location to land and regroup. We're in no shape for another confrontation right now." As their ship entered the planet's atmosphere, Nolan and Vesta prepared themselves for whatever challenges lay ahead. They had secured another Nexus core component, but they knew their journey was not nearly finished. The mysteries of the precursors still beckoned, and the future of the cosmos hung in the balance. Balance. The mysteries of the precursors still beckoned, and the future of the cosmos hung in the balance. As they entered the planet's atmosphere, the ship's sensors picked up more detailed information about the terrain below. Nolan guided their vessel towards a dense forest near the source of the unusual energy signature, carefully maneuvering between towering alien trees to conceal their landing site. The moment they stepped out of the ship, Nolan and Vesta were enveloped by the planet's unique atmosphere. The air was thick with humidity, carrying the scent of unfamiliar flora. Bioluminescent plants pulsed with soft, rhythmic light, casting an otherworldly glow across the landscape. Above them, twin moons hung in the sky, their combined light creating an ethereal ambiance that made the forest seem almost dreamlike. Nolan's enhanced vision adjusted quickly to the low light conditions. "This way," he said, gesturing towards a faint path barely visible among the undergrowth. "The energy signature is strongest in that direction." Vesta nodded, her antennae twitching as she processed the new sensory information. They moved through the alien forest with practiced stealth, their hybrid physiology allowing them to adapt quickly to the unfamiliar environment. As they progressed, the vegetation gradually thinned, giving way to a clearing. At the edge of the open space, partially buried beneath the planet's surface, stood a vast crystalline structure. Its design bore hallmarks of precursor architecture, but there were subtle differences that hinted at a distinct origin. "Look at the way it refracts light," Vesta whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "I've never seen anything quite like it." They approached the entrance only to find their path blocked by an invisible energy barrier. Nolan closed his eyes, concentrating on the gravitational fields around them. With a gesture, he manipulated the local gravity, creating a small distortion in the barrier. "Quick," he said, his voice strained with effort. "I can't hold it for long." Vesta slipped through the opening, followed closely by Nolan. As soon as they were inside, the barrier snapped back into place behind them. The interior of the structure was a maze of translucent corridors and chambers, each pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light that seemed to respond to their presence. They moved cautiously, their senses on high alert for any signs of danger or security systems. After navigating through several winding passages, they found themselves in what appeared to be a central control room. The chamber was dominated by a large crystalline console that hummed with latent energy. As they approached the console, a holographic interface flickered to life. A disembodied voice, smooth and genderless, filled the room. "Greetings, visitors. I am Area, the Advanced Relational Intelligence Algorithm. This facility has been dormant for 3.7 million standard years. May I inquire about your species designation and purpose here?" Nolan and Vesta exchanged a quick glance before Nolan spoke. "I'm Nolan, and this is Vesta. We're not entirely sure what we are anymore. Hybrid, I suppose. We've come seeking information about the Nexus core components." There was a moment of silence as Area processed this information. When it spoke again, there was a note of urgency in its voice. "Hybrid physiology detected. Nexus core energy signatures present. Initiating priority protocol Alpha 7. The room's lighting shifted, and new holographic displays materialized around them, showing star maps, complex equations, and what appeared to be schematics for massive energy structures. "The Nexus core components you seek are part of a safeguard system," Area explained. "They were created to protect against a cosmic threat known as the Void Harvesters, an ancient race that consumes entire civilizations to fuel their expansion across the universe." Vesta's antennae drooped as the weight of this revelation sank in. We had no idea, she said softly. We thought they were just powerful artifacts. Arya continued. When fully assembled, the Nexus core has the power to create a galactic shield capable of repelling the Void Harvesters. However, the activation of this shield would result in a complete restructuring of spacetime within its boundaries. As Nolan and Vesta absorbed this information, Arya's sensors detected multiple ships entering the planet's atmosphere. Warning: multiple vessels detected. Signatures match known profiles of Crimson Helix and Galactic Confederation ships. We need to go, Nolan said urgently. Arya, is there any way we can take this information with us? Affirmative, Arya responded. A small compartment opened in the console, revealing a crystal-like device. This contains a compressed version of my databases relevant to the Nexus core and the Void Harvesters. It also holds the key to unlocking the full potential of your hybrid physiology. Vesta quickly retrieved the device while Nolan interfaced with the console, initiating a data transfer to their ship's computers. As they prepared to leave, Arya spoke once more. The fate of countless civilizations may rest on your actions. Good luck, Nolan and Vesta. With a final nod of acknowledgement, they sprinted back through the crystalline corridors. As they emerged from the structure, they could hear the distant whine of approaching ships. There! Vesta pointed to a group of figures moving through the forest. Advanced scouts, we need to move quickly and quietly. They made their way through the dense foliage, using their enhanced abilities to avoid detection. Nolan's gravity manipulation allowed them to move silently over fallen branches and underbrush, while Vesta's empathic abilities helped them sense the locations of nearby search parties. When they finally reached their ship, Nolan wasted no time in powering up the engines. As they lifted off, the first enemy vessels appeared on the horizon. Hang on, Nolan warned as he pushed the ship to its limits, corkscrewing through the atmosphere to avoid incoming fire. Once in space, they found themselves in the middle of a chaotic battle. Crimson Helix and Confederation ships, momentarily setting aside their rivalry, focused their attacks on Nolan and Vesta's vessel. Vesta's fingers danced over the ship's controls, interfacing directly with the systems through their Nexus core components. I'm creating localized space-time distortions, she announced. It should confuse their targeting systems. Nolan expertly weaved through the barrage of enemy fire, using the distortions Vesta created to their advantage. As they fought their way clear of the planet's gravity well, Nolan glanced at Vesta. We need somewhere safe to study this data and figure out our next move, he said. Vesta nodded, her expression determined. Zafira, if anyone can help us understand what we're dealing with, it's her. Agreed. Let's hope these Nexus core components are up for another trick. Together, they focused their energy on the ship's systems, channeling the power of the Nexus core components. Space itself seemed to ripple around them as a temporary wormhole formed. As they plunged into the spatial rift, the crystal device they'd received from Arya began to glow. Energy coursed through their bodies, and they felt their hybrid physiology changing, adapting to harness more of the Nexus core's power. When they emerged from the wormhole, they found themselves in an unfamiliar sector of space, far from any known travel routes. As the adrenaline of their escape faded, Nolan and Vesta became aware of a profound change in their connection. Thoughts and emotions flowed between them with unprecedented clarity, their hybrid nature evolving to new levels of synergy. Nolan, Vesta said, her voice filled with a mix of awe and concern. What's happening to us? Before he could respond, the ship's computer chimed, indicating it had finished processing the data from Arya. As they began to review the information, they discovered coordinates for a hidden Guardian sanctuary where they hoped to find Zephyra. However, buried within the data was a chilling revelation. The Void Harvesters were much closer to reaching their galaxy than they had ever imagined. Nolan set the coordinates for the Guardian sanctuary, his expression grim but determined. As their ship entered hyperspace, he turned to Vesta, their newly deepened connection allowing him to sense her persistence. Whatever we face, he said, taking her hand, we face it together. Vesta nodded, her antennae glowing softly with shared emotion. As they sped towards their destination, they knew that the challenges ahead would test them like never before. The fate of the stars hung in the balance, and they were the only ones who could tip the scales. Scales, and they were the only ones who could tip the balance in humanity's favor. As their ship emerged from hyperspace, Nolan and Vesta found themselves facing a massive asteroid floating in the void of an uninhabited star system. At first glance, it appeared unremarkable, but their enhanced senses detected subtle distortions in the space around it. "There," Vesta said, pointing to a seemingly empty patch of space. "The cloaking field is strongest there." Nolan nodded, his fingers dancing over the controls as he guided their ship toward the hidden sanctuary. As they approached, an intricate network of energy fields became visible to their heightened perception. "It's like a maze," Nolan observed, his brow furrowed in concentration. "One wrong move and we could trigger the defensive systems." Vesta closed her eyes, reaching out with her empathic abilities. "I can sense the pattern," she said softly. "It's almost musical, like a cosmic symphony." Together, they navigated the invisible labyrinth, their ship weaving through the security measures with graceful precision. As they passed through the final barrier, the asteroid's surface shimmered and parted, revealing a hidden docking bay. They landed their vessel and stepped out into the cavernous hangar. The air inside the sanctuary was crisp and clean, with a faint scent of ozone. As they took in their surroundings, a figure emerged from a nearby corridor. "Welcome, Nolan and Vesta," said a melodious voice. "I've been expecting you." Zephyra, the guardian they had come to see, stood before them. Her form was tall and lithe, her skin a pale blue that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Her eyes, deep and ancient, held both wisdom and concern. "Zephyra," Vesta greeted her, inclining her head respectfully. "We've come seeking your help." The guardian nodded, her expression grave. "I know. Come, we have much to discuss and little time." She led them through winding corridors, the walls adorned with intricate patterns that pulsed with soft light. They arrived at a secure chamber deep within the station, where a large holographic display dominated the center of the room. With a wave of her hand, Zephyra activated the display. A three-dimensional map of the galaxy sprang to life, dotted with glowing points of light. "The red markers indicate the known locations of the remaining Nexus core components," Zephyra explained. "The blue represent the current positions of Crimson Helix forces, while the green show Galactic Confederation fleets." Nolan studied the map intently. "The Helix has made significant progress," he noted, his voice tight with concern. Zephyra nodded solemnly. "They've acquired another component, giving them a dangerous advantage, and the Confederation, unaware of the true threat, continues to pursue you as fugitives." Vesta stepped forward, her antennae twitching with nervous energy. "There's more," she said. "We've learned of an imminent threat to the entire galaxy." As Nolan and Vesta shared the information they'd gathered about the Void Harvesters, Zephyra's expression grew increasingly grim. When they finished, she closed her eyes for a moment, as if processing the weight of this new information. "Your fears are well-founded," she said, opening her eyes. "We've detected early signs of their approach at the edges of our galaxy. Our estimates suggest we have months, at most, before the situation becomes critical." Zephyra moved to a nearby console and retrieved a sleek, headband-like device. "This technology can enhance your hybrid abilities further," she explained. "It will allow you greater control and amplification of your Nexus core-derived powers." Nolan and Vesta exchanged a glance, then nodded in agreement. They sat in specially designed chairs as Zephyra carefully placed the devices on their heads. As the enhancement process began, Nolan and Vesta felt energy coursing through their bodies. It was intense, bordering on painful, as their hybrid physiology adapted to the increased power flow. Their skin began to take on a faint, shifting iridescence, reminiscent of precursor technology. Suddenly, their minds were flooded with visions of possible futures. They saw worlds consumed by the Void Harvesters, civilizations torn apart by war, and glimpses of a shield created by the fully assembled Nexus core. The shared experience strengthened their bond and solidified their willpower. When the process was complete, they stood, feeling the new power thrumming through their veins. Zephyra watched them with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "I have a plan to recover the remaining Nexus core components," she said, bringing up a new display. There's a secret precursor vault hidden within the accretion disk of a newly forming star system. We believe it contains two components and additional technology crucial to our fight. Nolan studied the data on the screen. The conditions in the accretion disk are extreme, he noted. How can we possibly navigate that? Zephyr gestured to a nearby workstation where a set of sleek, metallic suits awaited them. These, combined with your enhanced abilities and our navigation technology, will allow you to withstand the environment and breach the vault's defenses. As they began to prepare for the mission, alarms suddenly blared throughout the sanctuary. Zephyra rushed to a monitoring station, her face pale with concern. "A Crimson Helix fleet has been detected approaching our location," she announced. "They must have tracked your energy signature. You need to leave immediately." Nolan and Vesta quickly donned their new protective suits and gathered the necessary equipment. As they made their way back to their ship, they could hear the sounds of the sanctuary's defenses powering up. In a quiet moment before boarding, Nolan and Vesta stood facing each other. Their enhanced connection allowed them to share their fears, hopes, and deepening feelings without words. They embraced briefly, drawing strength from each other. As they boarded their ship, Zephyra handed them a portable version of the Guardian's advanced navigation system. "This will be crucial for your journey through the accretion disk," she said. "Go now, and may the stars guide you." They launched their vessel just as the first Crimson Helix ships emerged from hyperspace. Cloaking systems engaged, Nolan and Vesta watched the initial exchange of fire between the sanctuary's defenses and the attacking fleet as they sped away from the asteroid field. With heavy hearts but unwavering focus, they set course for the precursor vault. As their ship entered hyperspace, Nolan and Vesta prepared themselves for the challenges that awaited them in the heart of a forming star system. The hope of the universe hung in the balance, and they were about to push their newfound abilities to the limit. The hope of the universe hung in the balance, and they were about to push their newfound abilities to the extreme. As their ship emerged from hyperspace, Nolan and Vesta found themselves facing a spectacle of cosmic proportions. The newly forming star system stretched before them, its accretion disk a swirling maelstrom of superheated gas and dust. The raw energy emanating from the protostar at its center caused their sensors to fluctuate wildly. "Activating the Guardian's navigation system," Vesta announced, her fingers dancing over the controls. A soft hum filled the cockpit as a shimmering energy field enveloped their vessel, creating a protective bubble against the harsh conditions outside. Nolan gripped the ship's controls, his enhanced senses processing the overwhelming amount of data streaming through the ship's systems. "I see it," he said, gesturing to a faint energy signature pulsing amidst the chaos. "The vault's hidden within that large planetesimal." As they approached, the true scale of their task became apparent. Massive chunks of rock and ice hurtled through space, threatening to obliterate their ship at any moment. Nolan's brow furrowed in concentration as he reached out with his mind, manipulating the gravitational fields around them to clear a path. Vesta closed her eyes, her antennae glowing as she connected with the ship's sensors. "I'm detecting a safe approach vector," she said, her voice strained. 30 degrees to port, then a sharp descent. Following her guidance, Nolan piloted their ship through the treacherous environment. They weaved through debris fields and dodged geysers of superheated gas erupting from the planetesimal's surface. With each passing moment, the bond between them grew stronger, their actions becoming more synchronized. As they touched down on the planetesimal's unstable surface, the ship shuddered under the assault of fierce solar winds and intense radiation. Nolan and Vesta exchanged a determined look before donning their environmental suits. "Ready?" Nolan asked, his voice tinged with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Vesta nodded, her eyes shining with grit behind her helmet's visor. "Let's do this." They stepped out onto the treacherous terrain, their boots sinking slightly into the semi-solid surface. The landscape around them was alien and hostile, with jagged rock formations jutting out at odd angles and pools of molten material bubbling ominously. As they made their way towards the vault's entrance, the planetesimal's unstable nature became increasingly apparent. Sudden geysers of superheated gas erupted without warning, forcing them to dodge and weave. The ground beneath their feet shifted and cracked, threatening to swallow them whole. Nolan used his enhanced strength to leap over a widening fissure, pulling Vesta along with him. They landed hard on the other side, the impact sending shockwaves through their bodies despite their suit's protection. "We're close," Vesta said, pointing to a massive structure looming ahead. The vault's entrance was an imposing sight, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. As they approached, they discovered an elaborate locking mechanism guarding the entrance. Massive interlocking rings surrounded a central core that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. "I think I can align the rings," Nolan said, placing his hands on the outer ring. He closed his eyes, channeling his enhanced strength and control over gravity to slowly rotate the massive structure. Vesta, meanwhile, focused her mind on the central core. Her antennae glowed brightly as she established a telepathic link with the vault's security system. Images and alien concepts flooded her consciousness, threatening to overwhelm her. "Stay with me, Vesta." Nolan's voice came through their mental link, anchoring her. With a final push of combined effort, the rings aligned and the central core flared to life. The vault's entrance slowly opened, revealing a vast chamber filled with technology beyond their wildest imagination. As they stepped inside, their eyes were drawn to two Nexus core components suspended in shimmering stasis fields at the center of the room. The artifacts they already possessed began to resonate, creating a harmonic energy that filled the air with an eerie hum. Suddenly, their environmental suits sparked and sputtered, overloaded by the surge of energy. Nolan and Vesta quickly removed their helmets, relying on their hybrid physiology to adapt to the vault's interior atmosphere. "I'll work on disabling the stasis field," Nolan said, moving toward the suspended components. "See what else you can find." Vesta nodded and began exploring the chamber. Her enhanced senses led her to a hidden alcove where she discovered a repository of precursor knowledge. Without hesitation, she placed her hands on the alien interface, initiating a data transfer. Immediately, her mind was flooded with an overwhelming torrent of information. Visions of the Void Harvester's terrifying capabilities and the true potential of the Nexus core flashed before her eyes. The sheer volume of data caused her to stagger, her consciousness threatening to slip away. Nolan sensed her distress through their link and rushed to her side, catching her as she swayed. He cradled her head in his hands, using their telepathic connection to help stabilize her mind and process the vast influx of information. As their minds synchronized on a deeper level than ever before, something extraordinary happened. The Nexus core components in their possession fully activated, granting them unprecedented control over the matter and energy around them. With their newfound power, they secured the two new components and prepared to leave the vault. However, as they approached the entrance, their enhanced senses detected multiple energy signatures rapidly approaching the planetesimal. "Crimson Helix ships," Nolan growled, recognizing the energy patterns. "They must have tracked us here." Vesta's expression hardened as she processed the tactical data streaming through her mind. "It's worse than that," she said. "Commander Zarkoth is leading them personally." Trapped and outgunned, Nolan and Vesta exchanged a look of relentless drive. They knew that their next actions would not only determine their fate, but potentially the fate of the entire galaxy. With the power of the Nexus core components thrumming through their veins and their hybrid abilities pushed to new limits, they prepared to face the approaching storm. Crimson Helix forces. The air crackled with tension as Nolan and Vesta assessed their options. "We can't let them get their hands on these components," Nolan said, his mind racing through potential strategies. Vesta's antennae glowed as she processed the tactical data. "Agreed. But we also can't risk damaging the planetesimal further. The instability could trigger a chain reaction." Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shuddered violently. The planetesimal's core, destabilized by their earlier actions, was beginning to collapse. "We're out of time," Nolan grimaced. "We need to get off this rock now." As they sprinted back to their ship, the surface around them started to fracture. Geysers of superheated gas erupted with increasing frequency, turning their path into a deadly obstacle course. They reached their vessel just as the first Crimson Helix ships entered the planetesimal's atmosphere. Nolan engaged the engines while Vesta activated their enhanced shielding systems. As they lifted off, a massive energy beam from Commander Zarkov's flagship struck nearby, sending shockwaves through the disintegrating planetesimal. The resulting explosion catapulted their ship into the chaotic accretion disk. Nolan's enhanced reflexes were pushed to their limits as he navigated through the debris field. Vesta coordinated their defenses, using her connection to the ship's systems to predict and deflect incoming attacks. "We can't outrun them forever," Vesta said, her voice tense. "And if we enter hyperspace now, we risk tearing the ship apart." Nolan's eyes narrowed as he formulated a plan. "Then we use the accretion disk to our advantage. Hold on tight." He plunged their ship towards the protostar's core, using the intense gravitational forces to slingshot them around. The maneuver strained their vessel to its structural limits, but it also caught the pursuing Crimson Helix ships off guard. Several enemy vessels, unable to adjust in time, were torn apart by the gravitational forces. Others collided with debris or were vaporized by solar flares. As they emerged from the other side of the protostar, they saw Commander Zarkov's flagship still in pursuit, though heavily damaged. Suddenly, a massive solar prominence erupted between them, threatening to engulf both ships. In that moment, Nolan and Vesta shared a look of understanding. They couldn't leave their enemies to die, even if it meant risking their own lives and mission. Nolan reversed course, pushing their engines to the brink. They extended their ship's enhanced shields around Zarkov's vessel, using the combined power of their hybrid abilities and the Nexus core components to create a protective bubble. The solar prominence washed over them, battering their defenses with unimaginable force. Alarms blared throughout their ship as the systems overloaded and failed. Just when it seemed they would be overwhelmed, the prominence subsided. Both ships, battered but intact, drifted in the aftermath of the cosmic storm. As emergency systems kicked in, Nolan and Vesta realized the extent of the damage. Their hyperdrive was offline, and life support was failing. A quick scan revealed that Zarkov's ship was in even worse condition. "We need to dock with them," Vesta said, already calculating the risks. "It's the only way either of us survives this." Nolan nodded grimly and initiated the docking sequence. As the airlocks engaged, they prepared themselves for a potential confrontation. The doors slid open, revealing a group of injured Crimson Helix crew members, led by a visibly shaken commander, Zarkov. The Draconian leader's usual air of superiority was gone, replaced by a look of grudging respect. "It seems we owe you our lives," Zarkov said, his voice hoarse, "though I can't fathom why you would risk yourselves for us." Nolan stepped forward, his stance wary but open. "Because unity is our only hope against the true enemy. The Void Harvesters won't distinguish between our factions when they come." Vesta joined him, her antennae pulsing with residual energy. "We have a chance to change the course of this conflict, Commander. Are you willing to listen?" Zarkov studied them for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "It appears I have no choice. What do you propose?" As Nolan began to explain their situation, Vesta's enhanced senses detected a faint energy signature. She focused her attention on it, realizing with a start that it was coming from within their ship. "Nolan," she interrupted urgently, "we're not alone." Before anyone could react, a shimmering portal opened in the center of the room. A figure stepped through, its form indistinct and shifting, as if struggling to maintain cohesion in their reality. "Guardians," the being spoke, its voice resonating in their minds rather than their ears. "The time stream fractures, the nexus point awaits." With a gesture, the being expanded the portal. Through it, they could see a massive space station floating in the void, its design unlike anything they had encountered before. "Your path lies there," the being continued, "but choose quickly. The void approaches." Nolan and Vesta exchanged a look of understanding. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. They turned to Zarkov and his crew, extending an invitation with their eyes. The Draconian commander hesitated for only a moment before squaring his shoulders. "It seems our fates are intertwined. Lead on, Guardians." As one, the unlikely allies stepped through the portal, leaving the chaos of the collapsing star system behind. The nexus point loomed before them, a beacon of possibility in the face of impending darkness. The next phase of their journey was about to begin, and the stakes had never been higher. Higher. The portal closed behind them with a soft hum, leaving the group standing in a vast, dimly lit chamber aboard the Nexus Point station. Nolan and Vesta quickly took stock of their surroundings, their enhanced senses picking up subtle energy readings emanating from the walls. The architecture was unlike anything they had encountered before, with smooth flowing lines that seemed to defy conventional physics. Commander Zarkoth and his crew looked around warily, their scaled skin reflecting the soft ambient light. "What is this place?" Zarkoth asked, his voice a low rumble. Before Nolan or Vesta could respond, a holographic interface flickered to life in the center of the chamber. A disembodied voice, calm and authoritative, filled the air. "Welcome to Nexus Point, Guardians and Allies. Your presence has been anticipated. Please proceed to the central meeting chamber for debriefing." The group exchanged glances, then followed the illuminated path that appeared on the floor. As they walked, Nolan noticed the subtle shifts in the station's gravity, compensating for their movement and maintaining perfect equilibrium. They entered a large circular room where representatives from various galactic factions were already gathered. The air was thick with tension and hushed conversations. All eyes turned to Nolan and Vesta as they stepped forward. Without preamble, Nolan addressed the assembly. "Representatives of the galaxy, we come bearing critical information about a threat that endangers us all." Vesta stepped up beside him, her antennae glowing softly. "We have evidence of an enemy known as the Void Harvesters. Their power is beyond anything we've encountered before." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A Thalaxian diplomat raised a tentacle. "What proof do you have of this supposed threat?" Nolan nodded to Vesta, who reached into a pouch on her belt and withdrew two of the Nexus core components. As she held them up, they began to pulse with energy, responding to her hybrid physiology. "Allow us to demonstrate," Nolan said. Together, Nolan and Vesta channeled their abilities through the components, creating a shimmering holographic display in the center of the room. The image coalesced into a terrifying vision of a Void Harvester vessel, its dark form seeming to absorb the very light around it. Gasps of shock and fear echoed through the chamber as the representatives witnessed the simulated destruction of entire star systems. The hologram showed planets crumbling, their very essence being drained away by the Void Harvester's incomprehensible technology. As the demonstration reached its climax, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed the chamber, casting eerie shadows across the faces of the stunned representatives. "Alert! Unknown vessel approaching Nexus Point. Conventional scanners unable to identify." Nolan and Vesta shared a look of grim understanding. "It's them," Vesta said, her voice barely above a whisper. Commander Zarkoth stepped forward, his military training kicking in. "We need to get to the control center, now." The representatives, shaken out of their stupor, began to move with purpose. Nolan, Vesta, Zarkoth, and key members of the assembly rushed through the station's winding corridors, guided by holographic indicators. They burst into the control center, a hub of advanced technology that put even the most sophisticated Galactic Confederation systems to shame. Screens flickered with data streams and sensor readouts, all indicating an approaching object that defied classification. "It's disguised as an asteroid," one of the station's operators reported, confusion evident in their voice. Nolan stepped up to the main console, placing his hands on the interface. He closed his eyes, channeling his hybrid abilities to connect with the station's systems. Vesta joined him, their shared consciousness expanding to encompass the vast network of sensors and scanning equipment. With a surge of energy from the Nexus core components, they pushed the station's capabilities beyond their design limits. The main view screen flared to life, showing a real-time image of the approaching object. The asteroid's surface shimmered and distorted, revealing glimpses of the true form beneath. Sleek black metal gleamed with an otherworldly sheen, absorbing ambient light and energy. "Void Harvester Scout Ship," Vesta announced, her voice tight with tension. As if sensing it had been discovered, the scout ship dropped its disguise entirely. Its true form was even more terrifying than the holographic representation they had shown earlier. Organic curves melded seamlessly with technological components, creating a vessel that seemed more alive than machine. The station's defense systems activated automatically, energy shields springing to life around the structure. Weapon emplacements emerged from hidden compartments, tracking the approaching threat. A barrage of energy beams lanced out from Nexus Point, striking the Void Harvester scout ship. To everyone's horror, the attack seemed to have little effect. The scout ship's outer hull rippled, absorbing the energy and growing stronger. "Our weapons are useless," Zarkoth growled, his tail lashing in frustration. Nolan turned to Vesta, dedication etched on his face. "We need to take the fight to them. It's the only way." Vesta nodded, already moving towards the exit. "Our ship, the Nexus core components, it's our best chance." As they sprinted back towards the docking bay, Zarkoth fell into step beside them. "I'm coming with you," he said, leaving no room for argument. "My tactical experience may prove useful." They reached their ship in record time, the vessel's systems coming online as they approached. Nolan took the pilot's seat, his hands dancing over the controls with inhuman speed and precision. Vesta settled into the co-pilot's chair, interfacing directly with the ship's computer. Zarkoth strapped himself into one of the rear seats, activating tactical displays and sensor readouts. "We're outgunned and outmanned," he said, analyzing the data. "But we have the element of surprise. They won't expect a direct assault." As the docking bay doors slid open, Nolan engaged the engines. Their ship shot out into space, immediately coming under fire from the Void Harvester scout. Energy beams of impossible intensity lanced past them, narrowly missing their hull. Nolan's enhanced reflexes allowed him to weave through the barrage, using Nexus Point's structures as cover. Vesta focused her concentration on the Nexus core components, creating a protective energy field around their vessel. "Hold on!" Nolan called out as he executed a series of tight maneuvers, bringing them in close to the Void Harvester scout ship. "This is going to get rough." The real battle had begun, with the fate of Nexus Point and potentially the entire galaxy hanging in the balance. As energy weapons flared and shields strained, Nolan, Vesta, and their unlikely ally prepared to face the greatest challenge of their lives. As their ship engaged the Void Harvester scout, Nolan's hands danced across the controls with inhuman precision. The vessel responded instantly, weaving through a barrage of energy beams that threatened to tear them apart. Vesta's connection to the Nexus core components surged, creating a shimmering energy field around their ship. The protective barrier absorbed the brunt of the Void Harvester's attacks, but each impact sent tremors through the hull. "Shields holding at 78%, Vesta reported, her voice steady despite the strain. "But we can't take much more of this." Zarkoth's eyes darted between tactical displays, analyzing the enemy's attack patterns. "Their weapons are adapting to our defenses," he growled. "We need to end this quickly." Nolan nodded, his enhanced senses processing information at an astonishing rate. "I have an idea," he said, banking the ship hard to port. "But it's risky. Vesta, can you create a focused energy burst using the Nexus core?" Understanding dawned in Vesta's eyes. "Yes, but it'll drain our shields completely. We'll be vulnerable." "Do it," Nolan commanded, setting their ship on a collision course with the Void Harvester scout. As they hurtled towards the enemy vessel, Vesta channeled power from their shields into the Nexus core components. The ship's energy field collapsed, leaving them exposed to the scout's relentless attacks. "Now!" Nolan shouted. Vesta unleashed a concentrated burst of energy directly at the Void Harvester scout. The beam struck with pinpoint accuracy, piercing the scout's hull. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the enemy ship began to convulse, its organic components writhing in agony. Nolan didn't hesitate. He pushed their engines to the limit, narrowly avoiding a collision as they streaked past the dying Void Harvester scout. Behind them, the scout imploded, collapsing in on itself before vanishing in a flash of otherworldly energy. As the immediate threat dissipated, Nolan guided their ship back towards Nexus Point. The station's defenses stood down, recognizing their approach. A tense silence filled the cockpit as they docked, the weight of what they had just accomplished settling over them. "That was impressive," Zarkoth admitted, his scaled features betraying a hint of grudging respect. Before Nolan or Vesta could respond, an urgent transmission crackled through their comms. "Guardians, report to the central chamber immediately. we have a situation. The trio exchanged glances before hurrying through Nexus Point's winding corridors. They arrived at the central chamber to find it abuzz with activity. Representatives from various factions huddled around holographic displays, their faces etched with concern. A Thalaxian diplomat approached them, its tentacles writhing with agitation. "We've received a distress call from a distant colony world," it explained. The message was fragmented, but it spoke of a massive void harvester fleet. Nolan's eyes sharp. "We need to respond immediately. Gather whatever forces we can and—" "There's more," the diplomat interrupted. "Our long-range sensors have detected an anomaly at the coordinates where the Guardian's sanctuary once stood. It bears energy signatures similar to both void harvester and precursor technology." Vesta's antennae pulsed with excitement. "The sanctuary? But it was destroyed. Unless it wasn't," Nolan finished. "If any part of it survived, it could hold crucial information about the void harvesters." A heated debate erupted among the gathered representatives. Some argued for an immediate response to the colony world, while others stressed the importance of investigating the anomaly. As the arguments grew more intense, Nolan and Vesta shared a look of understanding. "We'll investigate the anomaly," Nolan announced, silencing the room. "The information we could gain might be vital in combating the void harvesters. Meanwhile, we'll leave a team here to coordinate a response to the distress call." There were murmurs of dissent, but no one directly challenged their decision. As the representatives dispersed to carry out their assigned tasks, Zarkoth approached Nolan and Vesta. "I'm coming with you," the Draconian commander stated firmly. "My tactical expertise could prove useful and—" He paused, his voice softening slightly. "I have much to atone for." Nolan studied Zarkoth for a moment before nodding. "All right, but remember, we're in this together now." The trio made their way to the docking bay where their ship awaited. In the short time since their battle with the Void Harvester Scout, Nexus Point's engineers had integrated advanced technology from the station into their vessel. The ship now hummed with newfound power, its systems seamlessly merged with Nexus core components. As they boarded, Nolan felt an immediate connection to the ship's enhanced systems. It was as if the vessel had become an extension of himself. Vesta experienced a similar sensation, her hybrid physiology resonating with the integrated Nexus core technology. With final preparations complete, Nolan guided their ship out of Nexus Point's docking bay. The vastness of space stretched before them, holding both promise and peril. As they engaged their enhanced propulsion systems, the stars blurred into streaks of light. Their journey to the coordinates of the Lost Guardian Sanctuary had begun. Whatever they would find there, Nolan knew it would be a crucial step in their fight against the Void Harvesters. As their ship hurtled through space, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against time itself. In itself, racing towards an uncertain future. As they emerged from hyperspace near Nexus Point, Nolan, Vesta, and Zarkoth were met with a flurry of activity. The station's docking bays bustled with ships arriving and departing, while urgent communications flooded their comm system. "Guardians, report to the central chamber immediately," came the familiar voice of the Thalaxian diplomat. "We have much to discuss." Nolan guided their ship into an available docking port, the enhanced systems responding to his thoughts with uncanny precision. As they disembarked, they were greeted by a contingent of Alliance representatives, their faces etched with a mix of relief and concern. The central chamber was a hive of activity, with holographic displays showing tactical data and real-time updates from across the galaxy. As Nolan, Vesta, and Zarkoth entered, a hush fell over the assembled leaders. "Welcome back," the Thalaxian diplomat said, its tentacles rippling with nervous energy. "We've received reports of increased Void Harvester activity in multiple sectors. The situation is escalating rapidly." Nolan stepped forward, his hybrid physiology allowing him to interface directly with the chamber's central holoprojector. He uploaded the data they had gathered from the Guardian Sanctuary, watching as gasps of astonishment rippled through the crowd. "This information could be the key to understanding the Void Harvester's weaknesses," Nolan explained, manipulating the holographic display to highlight key points. "But we need to act quickly." Vesta joined him, her antennae pulsing as she added her own insights. The sanctuary also provided coordinates for other Nexus core components. If we can secure them, we might have a chance at turning the tide of this war. A heated discussion erupted among the Alliance leaders, with various factions arguing for different courses of action. Commander Zarkoth, his military experience evident, raised his voice above the din. "We need to split our forces," he declared, silencing the room. "One group to investigate the distress call from the colony world, another to secure the remaining Nexus core components." The logic of his proposal was undeniable, and soon the Alliance reached a consensus. Zarkoth would lead a fleet to the colony world, while Nolan and Vesta would spearhead the mission to retrieve the Nexus core components. As the meeting adjourned, Nolan and Vesta found themselves surrounded by a team of engineers and technicians. "We've been working on upgrades for your ship," one of them explained, leading them towards the docking bay, "incorporating some of the Guardian technology you brought back." The next few hours were a blur of activity as their ship underwent a rapid transformation. New systems were integrated, power conduits rerouted, and a prototype device installed that promised to amplify the power of the Nexus core components. As they made final preparations for departure, alarms blared throughout Nexus Point. The station's long-range sensors had detected a massive energy surge in a nearby star system. "It bears the signature of a Nexus core component activation," a sensor technician reported, her voice tight with urgency. Nolan and Vesta shared a look of understanding. There was no time to lose. They boarded their newly upgraded ship, joined by a small task force of Alliance vessels. As they undocked from Nexus Point, Nolan felt the enhanced systems responding to his every thought. The ship moved with a grace and power he had never experienced before, cutting through space with incredible speed. They dropped out of hyperspace on the outskirts of the system, immediately confronted by a scene of chaos. A Void Harvester scout fleet surrounded a massive space station of unfamiliar design, its energy weapons lancing out at the encroaching enemy. "That station," Vesta breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's of precursor origin." Nolan's hands danced across the controls, weaving their ship through the debris-filled battlefield. Energy beams from Void Harvester scouts narrowly missed their hull as they approached the embattled station. "This is Guardian Ship Nexus Strider to Precursor Station," Nolan broadcast on all frequencies. "We're here to help. Please respond." For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice crackled through their comms, speaking in an ancient dialect that their ship's computer struggled to translate. "Guardians, after all this time," the voice sounded both hopeful and suspicious, "we are the last Guardians of the Nexus core. Our defenses are failing. If you truly come to aid us, prove your worth." Nolan looked to Vesta, who nodded in agreement. They had come too far to turn back now. With a thought, Nolan engaged the ship's new systems, channeling power through the Nexus core components they carried. A shimmering energy field expanded from their ship, enveloping nearby Alliance vessels. As one, they surged forward, cutting through the Void Harvester formation with unprecedented coordination and power. "Docking procedures initiated," Vesta announced, her hands flying over the controls. "We need to board that station and secure the Nexus core component before it's too late." As their ship attached to the ancient precursor station, Nolan felt a tremor run through the structure. The battle outside raged on, but a new challenge awaited them within. They had minutes at most to navigate the station's defenses, convince its inhabitants of their intentions, and secure the Nexus core component. With a shared look of persistence, Nolan and Vesta rose from their seats, ready to face whatever awaited them aboard the mysterious precursor station. The hope of the universe hung in the balance, and time was running out. Out. The airlock hissed open, and Nolan and Vesta stepped onto the ancient precursor station, their senses on high alert. The interior was a maze of winding corridors, illuminated by a soft, pulsing blue light. As they moved deeper into the station, they encountered a series of intricate security measures and puzzles. Holographic interfaces sprang to life, displaying complex sequences of symbols and patterns. "These defenses are unlike anything I've seen before," Nolan muttered, studying a particularly challenging energy barrier. Vesta's antennae twitched as she focused on the alien script. I think I can decipher this. It's similar to the language we encountered at the sanctuary. As they worked to bypass the security measures, a voice crackled over their comms. Guardians, this is Commander Zarkoth. The situation at the colony world has escalated. We need reinforcements immediately. Nolan and Vesta exchanged a tense look. The weight of their decision pressed heavily upon them. We can't abandon this mission, Nolan said, his voice tight. But we can't leave Zarkoth without support either. Vesta nodded, her eyes gleaming with grit. We'll have to split our forces. They quickly formulated a plan, dispatching a smaller task force to aid Zarkoth while they continued their primary mission. As the reinforcements departed, Nolan and Vesta pressed on, leading their team deeper into the station. The corridors narrowed, forcing them to proceed in single file. Suddenly, the floor beneath them shuddered, and a section of wall slid away, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, they found makeshift living quarters and discarded food containers. Someone's been here recently, Nolan observed, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. A voice rang out from the shadows. Well, looks like we've got company. A group of aliens emerged, weapons trained on Nolan and his team. Their leader, a lithe Arcturian with piercing silver eyes, stepped forward. I'm Lyra, she said, her voice a mix of curiosity and suspicion. And you're trespassing on our salvage operation. Nolan raised his hand slowly. We're not here to cause trouble. We're searching for something vitally important. Lyra's eyes narrowed. The Nexus core component? Sorry, but we found it first. Before Nolan could respond, Vesta stepped forward, her antennae pulsing with a soft light. She began speaking in the ancient precursor language, her words flowing like water. Lyra's eyes widened in surprise. You speak the old tongue? As Vesta explained their mission and the threat of the Void Harvesters, the tension in the room slowly dissipated. Lyra lowered her weapon, a look of understanding dawning on her face. If what you're saying is true, she said, then we're all in danger. Nolan nodded. We need to work together. The Nexus core component is our best hope against the Void Harvesters. With Lyra and her team now allies, they made their way to the central chamber of the station. There, they found the Nexus core component pulsing with otherworldly energy inside a precursor vault. As they worked to secure the component, the station's system suddenly roared to life. Holographic displays flickered into existence, showing a star map dotted with pulsing markers. It's a map of Nexus core components and precursor installations, Vesta breathed, her eyes wide with excitement. Their moment of triumph was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the station, and Nolan's comm crackled with an urgent message. Guardian Nolan, this is the fleet. We've detected multiple Void Harvester vessels entering the system. Nolan's fist tight. Everyone, back to the ships, now! They raced through the corridors, the newly acquired Nexus core components safely in tow. As they reached the docking bay, they could see the Void Harvester fleet through the station's viewports, their organic ships writhing against the backdrop of space. Lyra, you and your team are coming with us, Nolan shouted over the din of the alarms. We need every advantage we can get. As their ships disengaged from the station, the Void Harvesters opened fire. Energy beams lanced through space, narrowly missing their hulls. Nolan's hands danced over the controls, guiding their ship through a series of evasive maneuvers. Beside him, Vesta focused intently, channeling the power of the Nexus core components. A shimmering field of energy enveloped their ships, deflecting the Void Harvesters' attacks. Nolan used this momentary advantage to plot a daring escape route through a nearby nebula. As they entered the swirling gases of the nebula, Nolan called out to the fleet, All ships, prepare for slingshot maneuver on my mark. He guided their ship through the nebula's gravitational eddies, building up speed. At the precise moment, he gave the order, and the entire fleet rocketed out of the nebula, leaving the Void Harvesters far behind. As they entered hyperspace, a tense silence fell over the bridge. They had secured a crucial victory, but the war was nowhere near the end. Nolan's comm system blinked with an incoming transmission from the task force sent to aid Zarkoth. Guardian Nolan, the message began, the situation at the colony world has become critical. The Void Harvesters have deployed a new terraforming weapon. We need immediate assistance. Nolan looked at Vesta, then at Lyra and her team. The newly acquired star map offered them options, but also highlighted the vast scope of the conflict ahead. As they set course for the rendezvous point with the rest of the Alliance fleet, Nolan knew their next decision would be crucial in turning the tide of the war. The stars streaked by outside the viewport, a silent reminder of the countless lives hanging in the balance. With the Nexus core components secured and new allies at their side, Nolan and Vesta began formulating plans for their next mission, acutely aware that every moment counted in their race against the Void Harvesters. The hyperspace journey to the rendezvous point was tense, with Nolan and Vesta poring over the newly acquired star map. As they dropped out of hyperspace, a cluster of Alliance ships materialized around them, their hulls bearing the scars of recent battles. Aboard the command ship, Nolan and Vesta convened an emergency meeting with the Alliance leaders. The holographic display of the star map hovered above the central table, casting an ethereal glow on the faces of those gathered. The map shows us the locations of the remaining Nexus core components, Nolan explained, gesturing to the pulsing markers. But we're spread thin, and the Void Harvesters are pressing their advantage. Vesta nodded, her antennae twitching with concern. We've received word that the situation at the colony world has deteriorated. Commander Zarkoth's forces are barely holding the line. The room erupted in a flurry of voices, each leader arguing for a different course of action. Nolan raised his hand, silencing the debate. We need to split our forces again, he said, his voice firm. I'll lead a team to secure the nearest Nexus core component. Vesta, you'll take a group to reinforce Zarkoth and assess the situation at the colony world. As the meeting adjourned, Nolan assembled his team. Xylos, the Guardian engineer, approached him with a determined look. I've analyzed the star map data, Xylos said. The nearest component is located within the core of a small, rocky moon orbiting a gas giant. The precursor structures there are likely to be challenging. Nolan nodded, a grim smile on his face. Then it's a good thing we have you with us. Meanwhile, Vesta prepared for her mission. Lyra, the Arcturian salvager they had encountered on the precursor station, approached her. My team and I would like to join you, Lyra said, her silver eyes gleaming. We've got experience with alien tech that might come in handy. Vesta accepted the offer gratefully, knowing they'd need every advantage they could get. As the two groups prepared to depart, Nolan and Vesta shared a moment alone on the observation deck. The stars stretched out before them, a vast canvas of possibilities and dangers. Be careful out there, Nolan said, his hand resting on Vesta's shoulder. Vesta's antennae brushed against his arm, a gesture of affection and reassurance. You too. Don't take any unnecessary risks. With a final nod, they parted ways, each boarding their respective ships. The Alliance fleet split, with Nolan's group setting a course for the gas giant and Vesta's team racing towards the embattled colony world. Nolan's ship dropped out of hyperspace near the gas giant, its swirling storms dwarfing the small rocky moons that orbited it. Xylos pointed to one of the smaller moons, its surface a maze of crumbling precursor structures. That's our target, he said, bringing up a detailed scan on the main view screen. The Nexus core component is deep within the moon's core, surrounded by active precursor systems. As they approached the moon's surface, the ship's sensors detected energy fluctuations and unstable gravitational fields. Nolan guided the ship through the treacherous approach, landing in a relatively stable area near a massive, partially collapsed structure. The team disembarked, their environment suits protecting them from the harsh conditions. Nolan took point, his hybrid physiology allowing him to sense the energy flows around them. This way, he called out, leading the group towards a shimmering energy barrier. Xylos, can you make sense of this? The Guardian engineer studied the barrier, his fingers dancing over a holographic interface. It's a security measure, but I think I can... There! The barrier flickered and disappeared, revealing a dark passage leading into the moon's interior. As they ventured deeper, they encountered more obstacles. Shifting gravitational fields that threatened to crush them, sudden energy discharges that lit up the ancient corridors, and collapsing structures that forced them to find alternate routes. Nolan's enhanced abilities proved crucial, allowing him to create localized force fields to protect the team from falling debris and redirect dangerous energy surges. Xylo's expertise with precursor technology helped them navigate the complex security systems and decipher the cryptic instructions left behind by the ancient civilization. After hours of careful progress, they reached a vast chamber at the moon's core. Suspended in the center, surrounded by a complex array of energy fields and pulsing machinery, was the Nexus core component. Incredible, Xylos breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. The power output is off the charts. As they approached the central platform, Nolan felt a tremor run through the floor. Warning lights flashed across Xylos's interface. "We've triggered some kind of failsafe," the engineer shouted. "The moon's core is becoming unstable." Nolan made a split-second decision. "We don't have time for finesse. Xylos, start the extraction process. Everyone else, prepare for immediate evac." As Xylos worked to disengage the Nexus core component, Nolan channeled his hybrid abilities, creating a bubble of stability around them. The chamber shook violently, ancient support structures groaning under the strain. "Got it," Xylos called out, the Nexus core component now free from its housing. "Move," Nolan ordered, maintaining the protective field around them as they raced back through the collapsing passages. They reached the ship just as the moon's surface began to break apart. Nolan took the controls, pushing the engines to their limit as they escaped the disintegrating planetoid. As they cleared the gas giant's gravitational field, preparing to jump to hyperspace, an urgent transmission came through. "Nolan, this is Vesta," her voice crackled with static and tension. "We've got a critical situation here. The Void Harvesters have deployed a terraforming weapon. We've managed to board it, but they've initiated a self-destruct sequence. If this thing blows, the entire planet is done for." Nolan's hands tightened on the controls. "We're on our way, Vesta. Hold on." He plotted a course for the colony world, pushing the ship's engines beyond their safe limits. The newly acquired Nexus core component hummed with power, and Nolan knew it might be their only hope of averting catastrophe. As the ship streaked through hyperspace, Nolan addressed his team. "We're heading into a hot zone. Be ready for anything." The ship shuddered and strained against the forces of accelerated, faster-than-light travel. Nolan's mind raced, formulating plans and contingencies. They had secured one Nexus core component, but now faced the possibility of losing an entire world to the Void Harvester's high-stakes endeavor. With the colony world's coordinates locked in, Nolan prepared for the final approach. The fate of countless lives hung in the balance, and the next few moments would determine whether their hard-won victory would turn to ashes. Devastating loss. As they dropped out of hyperspace near the colony world, the scene that greeted them was one of chaos and destruction. The Void Harvester terraforming device loomed ominously over the planet, its massive form casting a shadow across the world below. Alliance ships darted around it, exchanging fire with the remaining Void Harvester defenders. Nolan's hands flew over the controls, pushing the ship's engines to their limits as he initiated emergency docking procedures. The ship's hull groaned under the stress of the high-speed maneuver, but Nolan's enhanced piloting skills allowed him to successfully connect with the device's outer structure. "Xylos, Guardians with me," Nolan ordered as the airlock sealed against the terraforming device. "We're going in hot." They moved swiftly through the device's corridors, encountering pockets of Void Harvester resistance. Nolan's gravity manipulation abilities proved invaluable, allowing him to disarm opponents and create temporary barriers to protect his team. The Guardians moved with practiced efficiency, their advanced weaponry making short work of the alien defenders. As they fought their way deeper into the structure, Nolan's calm crackled to life. Vesta's voice came through, strained and urgent. "Nolan, we're in the central control room. We've managed to delay the self-destruct sequence, but we're running out of options." "Hold on, we're almost there," Nolan replied, gesturing for his team to pick up the pace. They rounded a corner and found themselves face-to-face with a group of Void Harvesters. Without hesitation, Nolan reached out with his powers, creating a localized gravitational field that sent the aliens crashing into the walls. The Guardians moved in, neutralizing the stunned opponents with precision shots. The device shuddered around them, sections of flooring and walls beginning to collapse. Nolan used his abilities to stabilize their path, creating temporary bridges across gaps and reinforcing weakened structures. Finally, they reached the central control room. Vesta and her team were working feverishly at various consoles, their faces etched with concentration and worry. Lyra, the Arcturian salvager, was elbow-deep in a panel of alien technology, her silver eyes narrowed in focus. "Nolan!" Vesta called out, relief evident in her voice. "The core's becoming unstable. We need to act fast." Without a word, Nolan joined Vesta at the main control interface. Their eyes met, and a silent understanding passed between them. Together, they reached out with their hybrid abilities, channeling their power into the device's systems. Xylos and Lyra worked in tandem, their expertise in alien technology allowing them to decipher the complex Void Harvester systems. "We're making progress on disabling the self-destruct," Xylos reported, his fingers dancing across a holographic interface. "But it's not enough. The core's instability is increasing exponentially." Nolan made a split-second decision. "We need to use the Nexus core components," he said, his voice tight with concentration. "It's our only chance." Vesta nodded, her antennae quivering with tension. Together, they focused their abilities, drawing upon the immense power of the artifacts they had acquired. Energy coursed through them, their skin taking on a luminescent quality as they struggled to contain the terraforming device's unstable core. A shimmering field of energy began to form around the core, slowly expanding to encompass the entire room. The strain was evident on both Nolan and Vesta's faces, beads of sweat forming on their brows as they poured every ounce of their strength into maintaining the containment field. "We can't hold this forever," Vesta gasped, her voice strained. "We need to evacuate." Nolan nodded grimly. "Xylos, Lyra, get everyone out. Use the emergency transport pods. We'll hold the field as long as we can." The room erupted into a flurry of activity as the team began the evacuation process. One by one, crew members were ushered into the transport pods and launched back towards the safety of the Alliance ships. As the last of their team evacuated, Nolan and Vesta shared a look of unbreakable spirit. The containment field was holding, but they could feel their strength waning. "We can't just let it explode," Nolan said, his mind racing for a solution. "The damage to the planet would be catastrophic." Vesta's antenna twitched as an idea formed. "What if we redirect the energy? Use it to propel the device away from the planet?" Nolan's eyes widened as he grasped her plan. "It's risky, but it might work. We'll need to channel the energy upwards, push it beyond the atmosphere." With renewed focus, they began to alter the flow of energy within the device. The entire structure shuddered and groaned as it slowly began to rise from its orbit. Nolan and Vesta poured every ounce of their concentration into guiding its ascent, aiming to push it beyond the planet's atmosphere, where its eventual detonation would cause minimal damage. As they rose through the upper layers of the atmosphere, the strain on their abilities intensified. The outer hull of the device began to heat up from atmospheric friction, adding to the already perilous conditions inside. "We need to get it further," Nolan grunted, his body trembling with exertion. "It's not safe yet." Vesta's eyes suddenly lit up with a dangerous idea. "A wormhole," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If we combine our powers, we might be able to create a localized wormhole. Send it somewhere far from any inhabited worlds." Nolan met her gaze, understanding the immense risk such a maneuver would entail. But as the device's systems continued to deteriorate around them, he knew they had no other choice. Together, they began to focus their energies on a single point in space, just beyond the terraforming device. The fabric of reality began to warp and twist, a swirling vortex of energy forming before them. As the wormhole began to take shape, the terraforming device's systems went critical. Alarms blared throughout the structure, and pieces of the hull were torn away by the combined forces of their ascent and the spatial distortion. Nolan and Vesta poured every last reserve of their strength into maintaining the wormhole and guiding the device towards it. The structure around them started to disintegrate, the void of space visible through growing gaps in the hull. In the final moments before the device entered the wormhole, a terrible realization dawned on them both. There was no time left to escape. They would have to see this through to the end. Their eyes met one last time, a lifetime of unspoken words passing between them in an instant. Then, with a final surge of power, they pushed the terraforming device through the spatial rift. As they crossed the threshold of the wormhole, the world around them dissolved into a kaleidoscope of light and energy. The last thing Nolan saw was the wormhole closing behind them, sealing them off from the universe they had fought so hard to protect. In the space above the colony world, a brilliant flash of light marked the closure of the wormhole. The Alliance fleet hung in stunned silence, the enormity of what had just transpired slowly sinking in. On the planet's surface, Commander Zarkoth stared up at the sky, his multiple eyes wide with disbelief. Without hesitation, he activated his comm system, his voice filled with urgency as he issued his orders. "This is Commander Zarkoth to all Alliance ships. Initiate immediate search and rescue operations. Scan for any trace of Guardian Nolan and Vesta's energy signatures. We need to find them. Them and bring them home." His voice echoed across the comms, a mixture of hope and commitment. As the Alliance fleet mobilized for the search and rescue operation, the enormity of the task ahead became apparent. The wormhole had left no discernible trace, and the vastness of space seemed to mock their efforts. Commander Zarkoth's multiple eyes scanned the tactical displays aboard the flagship, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy. "Deploy the sensor arrays," he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of command. "I want every ship scanning on all frequencies. No stone left unturned." Days stretched into weeks as the search continued unabated. Alliance ships crisscrossed the sector, their sensors probing the depths of space for any sign of their missing heroes. The atmosphere aboard the vessels grew tense as hope began to wane. In the flagship's main conference room, Alliance leaders gathered to discuss their next steps. The debate was heated, with some arguing for the continuation of the search, while others stressed the need to resume their mission against the Void Harvesters. As voices rose in disagreement, Xylos stepped forward, his metallic form gleaming under the room's harsh lighting. "I may have a solution," he said, his synthesized voice cutting through the clamor. All eyes turned to him as he continued. "Using my knowledge of precursor technology, I believe we can construct a device capable of detecting the unique energy signature left by Nolan and Vesta's hybrid abilities." The room fell silent as the implications of Xylos' proposal sank in. Commander Zarkoth was the first to speak, his compound eyes fixed on the AI. "How soon can you begin construction?" "Immediately," Xylos replied, "but I'll need resources and assistance." Within hours, the flagship's hangar bay had been transformed into a makeshift construction site. Lyra and her scavenger team worked alongside Alliance engineers, their expertise in integrating alien technologies proving invaluable. The detection device took shape, a towering array of interconnected sensors and energy conduits that seemed to defy conventional design. As Lyra calibrated a particularly sensitive component, she called out to Xylos, "This tech is like nothing I've ever seen. Are you sure it'll work?" Xylos's photoreceptors flickered, the closest approximation to a nod he could manage. "The principles are sound. If Nolan and Vesta are out there, this will find them." Just as the final connections were being made, alarms blared throughout the fleet. Long-range scanners had picked up a massive surge of Void Harvester activity in a nearby sector. The Alliance ships buzzed with activity as they prepared for potential combat. Commander Zarkoth's voice crackled over the comms. "All ships, battle stations, scout ships report the Void Harvesters are converging on an uncharted region. We must intercept them before they acquire another artifact." The Alliance leadership convened once more, this time to make a difficult decision. After heated debate, they chose to split their forces. Xylos and Lyra would remain with a smaller group to complete and operate the detection device, while the main fleet, under Zarkoth's command, would move to engage the Void Harvesters. As the main fleet departed, Xylos and Lyra activated the detection device. The massive array hummed to life, sending out waves of energy that rippled through the fabric of space. Hours passed without results, the tension mounting with each silent sweep. Suddenly, a console lit up, emitting a series of rapid beeps. Lyra rushed to the display, her silver eyes widening. "We've got something! A faint signal matching Nolan and Vesta's energy signature." Xylos quickly analyzed the data. The signal originates from an uncharted star system on the opposite side of the galaxy. "We must act quickly." Within moments, a rescue team was assembled and equipped with a portable version of the detection device. They boarded the fleet's fastest ship, preparing for a long journey across the galaxy. As the rescue ship entered hyperspace, Lyra turned to Xylos. "What do you think we'll find?" The AI's response was measured. "I cannot predict with certainty, but whatever awaits us, we must be prepared for anything." Meanwhile, light years away, Commander Zarkoth's fleet engaged the Void Harvesters in a fierce battle. The space around them lit up with weapons fire, Alliance ships weaving through the enemy formation with practiced precision. Zarkoth's voice rang out over the comms, steady despite the chaos. "Focus fire on their lead ships. We must prevent them from reaching their objective at all costs." As the battle raged on, the rescue ship hurtled through hyperspace, carrying with it the hopes of the entire Alliance. The fate of Nolan, Vesta, and perhaps the galaxy itself hung in the balance, waiting to be decided in the uncharted reaches of space. Space. The fate of Nolan, Vesta, and perhaps the galaxy itself hung in the balance, waiting to be decided in the uncharted reaches of the cosmos. As the rescue ship emerged from hyperspace, the uncharted star system materialized before them. A blue-green planet loomed ahead, its surface marred by strange geometric patterns visible even from orbit. "Initiating scans," Lyra announced, her fingers flying over the control panel. "The signal's stronger now. It's coming from underground?" Xylos processed the data, his photoreceptors flickering rapidly. "Affirmative. The energy signature matches a subterranean structure approximately 2.7 kilometers beneath the surface." The ship descended through the atmosphere, buffeted by turbulent winds. As they neared the ground, the pilot, Lieutenant Astrid, expertly maneuvered between towering spires of crystalline rock that jutted from the planet's surface. "There," Lyra pointed to a flat expanse of metallic ground. "That looks like a landing pad." The ship touched down with a soft thud. As the rescue team disembarked, Dr. Ilara, xenobiologist, began taking readings with her handheld scanner. "The air's breathable, but there's an unusual concentration of charged particles," she reported. "It's interfering with our long-range communications." Major Kieran, the team's combat specialist, raised his pulse rifle. "Stay alert. We don't know what kind of security systems we might encounter." The team made their way to a circular hatch set into the ground. Xylos interfaced with the alien control panel, his circuits humming as he decrypted the locking mechanism. With a hiss of escaping air, the hatch slid open, revealing a dimly lit vertical shaft. As they descended via gravity lift, the walls around them pulsed with a soft, blue light. The air grew thicker, charged with an energy that made their skin tingle. At the bottom, they emerged into a vast chamber filled with towering alien machinery. In the center, surrounded by a shimmering energy field, stood two familiar figures, Nolan and Vesta. "By the stars," Lyra whispered. "They're alive." Dr. Ilara rushed forward, her scanner whirring. "They're in some kind of stasis, the energy field. It's integrated with their biology. This is unlike anything I've ever seen." As the team approached, the chamber's security system sprang to life. Panels in the walls slid open, revealing rows of sleek, metallic sentries. "Defensive formations!" Major Kieran shouted, opening fire on the nearest robot. The air crackled with energy weapons as the rest of the security team engaged the mechanical guardians. While Kieran and his squad held off the robotic attackers, Dr. Ilara and her assistants set to work on freeing Nolan and Vesta. They deployed a portable version of the detection device, calibrating it to interface with the alien technology. "Their hybrid physiology has become intertwined with the installation systems," Dr. Ilara explained, her voice tense with concentration. "We need to sever the connection carefully, or we risk causing permanent damage." As she worked, the energy fields surrounding Nolan and Vesta began to fluctuate wildly. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and arcs of electricity danced across the alien machinery. "The power core's destabilizing," Xylos warned. "We have approximately 47 minutes before a critical failure." Dr. Ilara made a split-second decision. We need to establish a neural link. It's the only way to guide their consciousness back to their bodies. She donned a neural interface helmet, connecting herself to the modified detection device. As the link activated, Dr. Ilara gasped, her eyes going wide as she was plunged into a swirling vortex of data and consciousness. Within the shared mental landscape, Dr. Ilara navigated through fragments of memory and streams of alien data. She called out to Nolan and Vesta, her voice echoing through the digital void. Gradually, two distinct presences coalesced before her. Nolan and Vesta's consciousness, intertwined with streams of precursor code, slowly began to separate from the installation systems. Back in the physical world, Major Kieran and his team fought a desperate battle against waves of increasingly sophisticated robotic defenders. They used overturned consoles and fallen machinery as cover, their weapons barely holding back the relentless assault. "We can't hold them off much longer," Kieran shouted, his armor scorched and dented. The chamber shuddered violently, chunks of ceiling crashing to the floor. Xylos interfaced with a nearby control panel, his processors working at maximum capacity to reroute power and stabilize the failing systems. "Dr. Ilara," Xylos called out, his synthetic voice tinged with urgency. "The installation's collapse is accelerating. We have less than 15 minutes remaining." Inside the neural link, Dr. Ilara redoubled her efforts. She guided Nolan and Vesta's consciousness back towards their physical forms, untangling the complex web of human, alien, and machine intelligence. With a final, wrenching effort, the connection severed. The energy field surrounding Nolan and Vesta flickered and died. Their eyes snapped open, gasping as if surfacing from deep water. We're back," Nolan croaked, his voice hoarse from disuse. His skin glowed faintly, intricate patterns like circuitry etched across his body. Vesta steadied herself against a nearby console, her antennae quivering. "The installation, we know its purpose now. We have to warn the others." As Dr. Ilara helped them to their feet, the chamber's structural integrity finally gave way. Massive cracks spiderwebbed across the floor and walls, and the distant roar of collapsing tunnels echoed through the complex. "Move, now," Major Kieran ordered, laying down covering fire as the team retreated toward the gravity lift. Nolan, still weak but determined, raised his hand. The air around them shimmered as he used his enhanced gravity manipulation to clear a path through the falling debris. Vesta's antennae glowed, projecting a weak energy shield that deflected smaller fragments. They reached the gravity lift just as the chamber behind them caved in. The ascent seemed to take an eternity, the shaft groaning and shaking around them as the installation collapsed. They burst out onto the surface, sprinting towards the waiting rescue ship. Lieutenant Astrid had the engines primed and ready, the ship hovering just above the landing pad. As they boarded, the ground beneath the ship began to give way. Massive sinkholes opened up, swallowing large sections of the alien structure. Lieutenant Astrid gunned the engines, the ship rocketing into the sky as the landing pad crumbled away beneath them. Once they achieved a stable orbit, the team finally had a moment to catch their breath. Nolan and Vesta, still bearing the visible signs of their ordeal, shared a long look before turning to address the others. "What we've learned changes everything," Nolan began, his voice gaining strength. "The void harvesters, the precursors, it's all connected in ways we never imagined." Vesta nodded, her antennae twitching with nervous energy. "The installation was part of an ancient defense network. If we can reactivate it, we might have a chance to stop the void harvesters once and for all." As the rescue ship set course to rendezvous with the Alliance fleet, Nolan and Vesta worked with Dr. Ilara to stabilize their altered physiology. They discovered that their connection to the Nexus core components had grown stronger, allowing for more precise control over energy and matter. The ship's long-range scanners suddenly lit up, detecting a massive energy surge in the distance. Lieutenant Astrid's voice came over the intercom, tense but controlled. "We're picking up signs of a large-scale battle. It looks like we've found Commander Zarkov's fleet." As they approached the coordinates, the rescue team realized that the knowledge they had gained might be the key to turning the tide of not just this battle, but the entire war against the Void Harvesters. With renewed purpose, they prepared to rejoin their allies and face whatever challenges lay ahead. Ahead, with renewed purpose, they prepared to rejoin their allies and face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the rescue ship approached the coordinates of the raging battle, the vastness of space erupted into a chaotic display of energy weapons and explosions. Lieutenant Astrid's hands flew over the controls, expertly maneuvering through the debris field and crossfire. Incoming transmission from Commander Zarkoth's flagship, Lyra announced, her silver eyes fixed on the communications array. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the commander's stern visage. "Rescue team, report your status. Did you find—" His eyes widened as he caught sight of Nolan and Vesta. "By the stars, you're alive." Nolan stepped forward, his skin still glowing faintly with intricate patterns. "Commander, we have critical information. Request immediate rendezvous with your flagship." "Granted. Sending coordinates now. We'll provide cover fire for your approach." As Lieutenant Astrid guided the ship towards the flagship, Nolan and Vesta prepared themselves. The couple shared a look of perseverance, their enhanced connection allowing them to communicate without words. The rescue ship weaved through the battle, narrowly avoiding energy beams and debris. A void harvester vessel loomed ahead, its dark hull absorbing nearby starlight. Before it could fire, a barrage of Alliance weapons tore through its defenses, creating an opening for the rescue ship to slip through. With a final burst of speed, they entered the flagship's hangar bay. The moment the ship touched down, Nolan and Vesta sprinted toward the bridge, followed closely by Xylos and Lyra. They burst onto the command deck, where Commander Zarkoth and his staff were coordinating the battle. Without wasting a moment, Nolan stepped up to the central holographic display. "Commander, what we've discovered changes everything," he said, his voice carrying an authority born from his ordeal. "The void harvesters, the precursors, it's all connected." Vesta joined him, her antennae glowing as she interfaced with the ship's systems. "We can show you." The holographic display shifted, expanding into a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Specific points began to glow, forming a complex network across the stars. "These are precursor defense installations," Vesta explained, her voice resonating with newfound knowledge. "If we can activate them, we'll create a network capable of repelling the Void Harvester invasion." Commander Zarkoth studied the map intently, his tactical mind already formulating a plan. "How do we activate these installations?" Nolan raised his hand, the circuitry-like patterns on his skin pulsing. "The Nexus core components are the key. We'll need to split our forces." As Nolan outlined the plan, the bridge crew worked quickly to integrate the new information into their battle strategies. Ships were reassigned, coordinates transmitted, and task forces formed. "It's risky," Commander Zarkoth said, his eyes scanning the updated battle projections. "But it's our best chance. Make it happen." Within minutes, the Alliance fleet began to split into smaller task forces, each led by a ship carrying a Nexus core component. As the main fleet engaged the Void Harvesters in a series of complex maneuvers, the task forces prepared for their precision jumps across the galaxy. Nolan and Vesta made their way to their upgraded ship, now integrated with salvage precursor technology. As they boarded, they found Xylos and Lyra already at their stations, along with a group of elite pilots from various Alliance species. "The central hub of the precursor defense network is our target," Nolan announced to his team. "It's located in a hidden pocket of subspace. The journey won't be easy, but what we do today will decide the fate of our galaxy." As the ship's engines hummed to life, cloaked in advanced precursor stealth technology, Nolan and Vesta took their positions at the helm. Their enhanced abilities allowed them to interface directly with the ship's systems, giving them unprecedented control and awareness. With a final nod to Commander Zarkoth's image on the console, Nolan initiated the launch sequence. The ship glided out of the hangar bay, slipping past the chaos of the main battle undetected. As they prepared to enter subspace, Vesta turned to Nolan, her eyes reflecting the willpower they both felt. "Ready?" Nolan took her hand, their combined energy causing the ship's systems to pulse with power. "Always." With a flash of light, their ship disappeared into the depths of subspace, carrying with it the hopes of countless worlds. Behind them, the battle raged on. Alliance ships executing their assigned missions across the galaxy. The final confrontation with the Void Harvesters had begun, and the fate of all sentient life hung in the balance.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.